Hi, this is Ernie Hudson, and you're listening to the Quantum Leap Podcast.
Hello, Leapers, and welcome back to the Quantum Leap Podcast, Quantum Leap AFTERSHOW. I'm Albie, and as always, with me is Hayden.
Sorry, Albie. I might need a minute or so to recover from this awesome episode.
So you enjoyed it, I guess?
What?
Did you enjoy the episode?
Yeah. Look, in terms of the one night in series, it's better than one night in Paris.
All right. Wow, that's pretty good. I enjoyed both. And with us, joining us again this season is Captain GameShow himself, John Irons. How you doing, John?
I'm doing well.
Welcome back. You're looking beautiful.
Thank you. I can't follow Hayden, so that's pretty good. It's
going to be one of those nights. All right.
You're not the only person that they just say, no, can't follow this person. That's why I don't have many people on Instagram.
Tonight we're talking about the second season, 5th episode, One Night in Koreatown. And this one was directed by Tamika Miller. You might know her. She directed The Christmas Lottery, if you've seen that. I love those kind of Christmas movies. And the writers were Deric A. Hughes and Benjamin Raab. They did Salvation or Bust and Paging Dr. Song. They're like a writing team. They did pretty good. They've been together for a long time. And we have a great interview in this episode from the writing team, the writers who brought you this episode, Benjamin Raab and Deric Hughes.
Very nice.
The director of One Night in Koreatown, we have Tamika Miller.
So that's really cool, and I want you to stay tuned for that interview. You don't want to miss it. It's a really good one. Let's see. It was edited by Christina Castro, friend of the show. We had her on a couple weeks ago. And then the director of photography was Jason Cuthers. So that's pretty good. And in case you haven't seen this, the recap goes something like this. It came out November 1st at 8 p.m. Eastern. Ben lands in the body of an 18-year-old working for his father's shoe store in Los Angeles' Koreatown at the start of the explosive 1992 riots. Facing an emotional connection in the riots to his past, Magic joins Ben on the leap. So that was cool. We had Dwayne, the kid that was designing the sneakers. His name is Benjamin Flores Jr., the actor. Jin, the father, was played by C.S. Lee. And Sonny was played by Danny Kang. And Luisa, the nurse, was played by Annalisa Velez. So,
and
pretty
Beth
good cast.
was played by Susan Dial.
Susan Dial, she was there. Man, yes. Can I just say, wow, I love having her back. Anytime she comes back, it's like the best.
And can I also just say, wow, Nostradamus does it again.
Yeah, you hadn't seen the episode yet, so yeah, those are good predictions. I have to say about Susan Dial being back on the show, having Beth back is great. I love Beth. Anything to do with Beth. She's the heart of the original show anyway, carried over to the new show. But I feel like I've been listened to because one of the complaints I had about a previous episode that Susan Dial was on was her name was in the opening credits early on in the episode, spoiling that Beth was going to be revealed to be in the episode. I was like, why would you do that? I know contractually and all that stuff. But they solved the problem because like the opening credits didn't happen until about 10 minutes into the episode after we had already seen Beth. So that was perfect. Sorry, I just had to mention that. Isn't it great to have her back? I can't wait to talk to her again about it.
Yeah.
Hopefully she'll have more episodes.
I am so pleased that, Magic has someone and Beth has someone now too. So, because, it's obvious that they were very close, even, good friends, even when Al was alive. And, they were a big support to each other after Al died and after Ben ended up lost in time for those few years. So, yeah, it is nice to know that Magic has a support network, and obviously so does Beth. I also thought that, I could have written this. I could have written this episode because of all the PTSD that that Beth has, having lived through Al's obsession with getting Sam and Al's depression, and the fact that she's like, no, I'm not going to put up with that with my second, my second relationship. I can't go through it again. And I think that's very fair. And I think that her being there will help Magic to stay grounded and help him to. Yes, Magic has to do his job, and they do have to try very hard to get Ben back. But I think Beth being there will help stop Magic from going into that obsessive sort of state that, from what we hear, Al would have gone through in the time that Sam was missing. Yeah.
I just love Beth and Magic together for some reason. I don't know if it's because I like Ernie Hudson so much and I like Beth so much, but I just think they're perfect together.
Yeah. Did you think maybe they aged up Susan Diol a little bit as well? She looked a bit older than she did when we saw her in
she always
season 1.
looks older. Yeah, she looks older on the show than whenever we talk to her in person over Zoom or whatever.
Well, she looked a little bit closer to the age that she really should be, which, I mean, don't forget we skipped 3 years too, so she should be probably mid-80s at least.
Yeah, when did MIA take place?
Oh, wow.
MIA would have been 1969, I think. So, and she was, I think, probably early 20s then. So
yeah.
So 60
she's never going to look as old as.
Yeah,
Susan's never going to look as old as Beth would, but they did something to make her look older.
Yeah. Well, it makes perfect sense. And I mean, Beth's obviously going through stuff too, so it would make sense that would age her a little bit too.
Yeah, they packed so much into this episode with the obviously with the new characters, like the individual characters for this episode, the characters of the Leap, but also, touching on the backstories of Ben and Magic. And it would have been easy, I guess. Well, it was skillfully done in a way that it didn't overload it. It didn't feel, I mean, the episode was heavy, but it's not because everybody got a little bit of backstory. Like it was so well balanced, the writing and the characterization and the acting on this episode. It was great. It was great.
Also, on the subject of Magic, how sad is it that we found out that he is an alcoholic and that he had serious issues during the time that Ben had essentially disappeared. It does make perfect sense. I mean, he is a Navy SEAL and he's been through traumas of war, and it would make sense that he's probably had issues in the past with substance abuse, and this massive trauma of losing one of your best friends, and especially someone who he considers part of his platoon. It would make perfect sense that he'd have a relapse and that he is really struggling. I'm glad that he does have Beth there to help him get through it, because he's going to need quite a big support network to be able to get by with his alcoholism. It is one of those things you just have to take one day at a time, and I think that it is quite. I mean, he hasn't even been sober a year. He said it was like 350 days, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
right under a year.
Yeah, and the fact that Beth found the empty bottle. He says that he didn't drink it, but I think it is still, open to debate as to whether he did. Look, I don't think he would have lied to Ben about it, though. So if he says he's been sober for 350 days, then he probably has been.
Yeah, I interpreted that as, I mean, but you're right, it was open. Like I choose to interpret it as he did pour out the bottle, and I've been sober these many days, like as of including this day, not I've been sober up until today.
At first, I didn't believe him because, like, when Beth went to kiss Magic kind of turned his head a little bit, so they didn't kiss on the mouth. So I was thinking, oh, maybe he's got alcohol in his breath. But then later on, I did believe Magic when he was talking to Ben, like you said. So I don't think he drank it.
Yeah. But no, this definitely was Magic's episode. It's funny that you said that you thought this was a perfectly balanced episode, though, John, because I actually don't agree with you. The episode was fantastic, I'm not going to lie, and spoiler alert, it's getting full marks. But I do think there were some issues with, him being pulled out during a very tense time when he should be on the leap, and then him saying he can't do this. Yeah, fair enough. He's got to leave if he can't handle it. But then we have to go through. I shouldn't say we have to go through, because it was a very important scene, and we did really need to experience it. But at the same time, Ben's life's in danger. But now we've got to go a few minutes hearing about Magic's issues when we should be focused on the leap. And really, Jen should have gone straight into the imaging chamber to help him. In a matter of life and death, he can't be left alone. So, yeah, Magic needs someone to talk to. But when the leap is that dire, someone has to be in the imaging chamber to help him. So, yeah, that's just something that struck out at me. That, everything that we did see was perfect, and everything that that went on, we did have to see. I just think that the ordering of it wasn't quite right, if that makes sense.
That's a fair point. I guess I didn't think about it. Well, I can't say I didn't think about it. It did occur to me in the moment, but it just kind of served to enhance the urgency of the situation. It's like, Magic's got to get it together so he can get back in there. But yeah, no, it did occur to me, but I guess it didn't bother me. If it had gone on too long, maybe it would have, or maybe, and that was also that the, I guess, the immediate danger was kind of allayed for the moment, I guess.
Yeah, part of the issue too is the fact that we can literally have anyone take on the role of the observer now. It's not like the original series where Al was the only one connected to Sam. I don't know if it's the case that just the main core group is connected to Ben through Ziggy, or if literally they can put anyone in there. But either way, they have the option now of having a rotating roster of observers, which it should be, because people have to sleep, people have to eat, people have to live their lives. You can't expect someone to be on call 24/7, so you do need to have shifts. That makes perfect sense. But like I was saying, in a dire situation, if there's an observer who can't handle it, get them out, put someone else in straight away, just to make sure that nothing goes wrong on the leap. They do have enough of the support staff to help Magic, even just with his support network. Ian's there, Jen's there, Addison's there, Beth's there if he needs her as well. But get someone in the leap to help Ben. Yeah.
I didn't think of that at all. When Magic said, "I'm sorry, I can't do this," I thought it was healthy, I would say, that he knew that he couldn't do it anymore. So he was protecting himself. And I think Ben, by not keeping on going while he was reliving a traumatic experience, and he might have been triggered by what was going on. Obviously, what was going on was bringing back deep trauma. And I thought that was healthy of him to say, "I can't do this right now." But as he was walking out of the imaging chamber, he should have handed the hockey puck to, like you said, Jen or somebody else. But I didn't think about that until you said it. I didn't miss it. But now that you say it, that does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, something else that I noticed about Magic. Who's the one that thinks to center in on the person they're looking for? Magic. Remember, I was whinging about that in the previous episode. And, you know, when Dwayne's missing and they need to find him desperately, Magic's the one who goes and finds him. Finally, someone with a brain in their head's in the imaging chamber.
That's crazy. We talked about it last episode. In this episode, they finally
I don't know if he thought to center on them straight away, or if he just ran around and tried to find them, or whether he actually locked in on the person. But either way, you've got an observer there. Observe.
Yeah. Oh, you know what else I thought? A weird aside about this episode. Addison wasn't in the imaging chamber at all this episode, of course, and she wasn't wearing a leather jacket. But Magic was in the imaging chamber, being the hologram, and he was wearing a leather jacket. So I think it's just very cold in the imaging chamber, and they need a jacket in there. That's my only thought. Might have something to do with liquid nitrogen.
I've got another idea about that.
What?
Yeah. Don't you think the imaging chamber would be extremely radioactive? Maybe it's for
That I
protection.
don't know. I don't understand the technology. So
Yeah. Well,
to me,
I
it's
don't
just
either.
like a 3D holodeck, right?
Well, it could
That's
be.
what I figured it was.
Yeah, but it's cold in there. It's got to be because now that Addison's not in there, she was in like a nice blouse. She was in a sports bra, but normally she's bundled up like it's the wintertime.
Yeah. Do you think that maybe... I know that the reason they had Magic as the hologram in this episode is because of his ties to what happened in when he was involved in riots and, his past. But do you think that maybe the project should have picked a more seasoned hologram, saying, actually, this is a more dire situation. I know there's an issue, but Addison, you're probably the only one with the experience who can handle this. Maybe Addison should be in there. Or maybe, Ian, you've been the hologram a few times. We need someone who can handle anything that's going to happen. Maybe we should send you in there. I don't know if they should have put who's essentially a newbie hologram in probably the most dire leap that Ben's been in.
I don't think so. I mean, as he said when they asked him if he could do it, like he was a Navy SEAL. He's been in tense situations before. Yeah, I didn't see him as any less competent than Addison or Ian in this during the leap. I mean, and that would have, and Addison wasn't really an option, so it would have been Ian or Jen, and I feel like Magic is, at least as, yeah, I don't see why either of them would have had any more experience on this leap than he would have.
Yeah, I think the hologram too is more just to relay information to Ben more than anything because it's really the team solving the problems because they're all observing the leap. And when I originally wanted Magic to be a hologram, I was thinking in a comedy sense since he wasn't good with all the technology and stuff like that. But I'm glad they didn't go that way at all. He was very competent in this leap as the hologram. But like you were saying earlier, Hayden, definitely Magic's episode, Ernie Hudson's episode, this whole episode. Can I just say Ernie freaking Hudson? I mean, we've only gotten him a few minutes here and there, and they've really wasted him up until this point. There's been a couple good scenes and a couple good conversations, but this episode so showed Ernie Hudson's ability just to bring it. I mean, he did amazing. As soon as I finished watching the episode, I messaged producers. I said to him, you should submit this episode for the Emmys because Ernie Hudson just knocked it out of the park in this one. I was emotional and into it the whole time, and it fully, it was on Ernie Hudson that carried that whole episode.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Ernie Hudson can do no wrong.
I mean, if you need me to verbally give my assent, yes, also. Ernie
No,
Hudson is the...
I should have ended my sentence a little bit better.
That's fine.
But he was just amazing and perfect at it. Deborah Pratt had said that this was a really good episode, and I was worried because it had like Black on White on Fire to live up to. And like Deborah said, it was a different direction and focused more on a smaller part of a family. So it wasn't like directly competing with it. It was just in the same area genre. But I think the whole episode knocked it out of the park. I'm going to give it high marks too. But overall, I think the one thing coming out of this episode is I'm going to walk away with just this was the Ernie Hudson episode, and man, is he good. Man, is he good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we need a big pitch hitter like Dean Stockwell was. So
when I was watching this, I was saying this is Dean Stockwell level. This is like Dean Stockwell and Jimmy kind of level emotion, and he's pulling it off.
And MIA.
I was just eating it up. Oh yeah, MIA. I was just it was amazing. Just thinking about it makes me happy and emotional at the same time.
And it was nice to see you really do get the sense that this team is a family. Like when he told Ben, it's like, he admitted, I'm an alcoholic, and when I can't remember if it was that scene or I think it was at the end of the episode, when Ben is talking to the family in the leap, and he's also talking to Magic. He's like, we're going to get through this. we're gonna lean on each other. We're gonna take this. It was the performance was so good of like, sometimes it's not always great, when he's talking to the hologram and he's talking to the people around him and making it seamless. But that scene was perfect. It was perfect.
Yeah. Although it was a bit ironic that Ben was saying, I'll always be there for you, when really it was him disappearing, which, prompted the alcoholic relapse. So, yeah. I mean, it's nice words, but I don't know if Ben's actually going to be able to follow up on that.
He'll always be there for him within his control. I mean, something's leaping him around in time. You can't really control that, as far as we know yet. It was showing them more like a family, when Jen just held Magic's hand in the office. I'm here for you, that really touched me. And then later on, when Ian and Addison hugged, it was more of that whole family and just the support system that they have, and I really love that.
Yeah, when that scene happened, when Ian went into the gym to talk to Addison, I was like, "What? Like, this is not what are you doing? This isn't, But no, but by the end of it, it's like, oh, okay. They were telling her because they all need to be there for, it was not an intervention, but it was like, they were all there, that line of support. Like, we've got you. Like, we're.
Yeah. It did seem a little out of place, though, when, Ben's in this dire situation and then Ian just out of the blue says, oh, you can cut the tension with a knife, this stuff going on with Addison and Ben. And I'm like, well, that kind of came out of nowhere. And then they start talking about, I feel like I'm a child of divorce and all that sort of stuff. So that was a bit strange. I don't know where you would put it or how you'd more organically, incorporate it. But it just seemed, it just kind of seemed a bit jarring compared to everything else. So
I like that they're setting up that. Well, I mean, they've. I guess it's always been this way, but it's very clear this season that Jen and Ian are this, not clique, but this little duo that's always up to something. So I put it under that umbrella. So it was fine.
They're the troublemakers of the group, aren't they? They're the ones that don't mind getting their hands dirty if they need to. Whereas, Magic and Addison are the ones that, have to try and keep their squeaky clean, reputations because of their military backgrounds.
Well, I think it was the last episode where Magic said, and I know Ian and Jen are up to something, but they're always up to something. So I like that. But I loved when Jen called out are we going to talk about, the tension between Ben and Addison? And Ian was like, thank you. I think it was like at the perfect time in the episode, because at that time in the episode, I think the viewers at home, including myself, are thinking, well, what about Ben and Addison? And that's freaking me out. And to call it out and put it out there was just perfect for me. I really loved it.
Mm-hmm. Did anyone else think when Ziggy was going haywire that maybe the hack had done something to Ziggy?
Yes.
That's what I thought was going to happen. I didn't think it was just going to be that Ziggy was noticing a change in the timeline, because wouldn't that happen all the time? I don't think we've ever seen Ziggy have that sort of a reaction. So
and I'm still not convinced that wasn't the case. I think that the chip is more problematic than even they know.
Well, maybe the chip is programmed to more easily pick up changes in the timeline and make it known, but that also means that information's being sent out to Rachel's boss, and we don't really know what their purpose is yet. I have my theories. I think in the previous episode, I actually think it's the origins of the Evil Leaping project. But I mean, it would make sense because
that was my thinking as well.
Yeah, because wouldn't it make sense that they're getting information about the history that Ben is changing, and maybe there's some opposing group who thinks that time travel. It could even be that they're an opposing group that thinks, no one has the right to go and mess around in time, and they're going to send someone back to go and put everything that Ben changed back the way it originally was, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because they're like, well, no, time was supposed to be like this, but, yeah, I don't know, but these are the sorts of things that go through my head. And yeah, I mean, that was extremely strange what happened to Ziggy, and it makes me think it's got to be the hack, because like history's changing around them all the time. I mean, the only reason they're not affected in the project is because of the quantum bubble, but you know, Ziggy's keeping track of it all. It shouldn't be that dire a situation. I know that there did end up being a change in who was likely to die, but still, like, there's no reason we should have set off alarms. Yeah.
That happened in the bank heist episode. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, now everybody dies.
Mm-hmm. Good observation. I didn't think about it when I was watching it, but now that you say it, I'm sure that's going to come back in the future. Like, they're going to show that, like, maybe what happened back then in this episode. But yeah, I didn't notice it. I was just so into the story. I want to talk more about the story, the leap, actually, when we get back. But we have a couple great interviews. But first, we need to pay some bills. Hayden, who's our sponsor this week? I believe we have our great sponsors back. They've been very supportive of us.
Oh, yeah, look, Campakes will never leave us, but I am very pleased to say that they've gotten in touch with a very high-up shoe designing company. And now you can actually get Campakes in your shoes. They've got secret compartments where you put the batter, and it actually cooks your Campakes for you as you are walking along. You don't even need the can anymore. You can actually just always have, you know, your Campakes on hand, or on foot, I suppose would be the better way of saying it. So quantumleappodcast.com/Campakes, and I've had a look at their designs. They are awesome. Like, you would never think there's pancakes in them, and that just even adds to the awesomeness. So, and yeah, I think we've got some promotions going on as well. If you subscribe, you know, you'll get a different pair of shoes every month. They don't send you the ready-made Campakes this time. They send you the batter so that you can experience the thrill of making the Campakes while you're multitasking, doing other things while you're walking around. But yeah, very, very innovative stuff going on.
If you go to our link, it's quantumleappodcast.com/Campakes. You'll get $15 off your first purchase. So that's good. $15 off.
And they only cost $10 to start with. We're giving you money.
Hayden, as our sponsor liaison, can you have them send me a pair?
Sure.
Thank you. All right, so let's go to this great interview.
Hey, this is Matt and Chris at the Quantum Leap Podcast, and we've got a really special feature for you today. We have not one, but two co-executive producers from Quantum Leap with us. We've got Benjamin Raab and Deric A. Hughes. Benjamin, Deric, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So this is the first time we've had you on the show. You've obviously been with the series since the start. We have so much to catch up on. I know, obviously, we really want to spend some time talking about this week's episode, but I think it would be remiss of us if we didn't just have a very quick look back at how things have been over the last year. So can I just start by asking you how you got involved in the show, and what kind of previous knowledge you had of Quantum Leap when you joined the series?
We came to the show right around the time, obviously before it was starting up. Deric and I obviously know about the show from growing up. Deric was more of a viewer of it than I was. I was in college when the show came out, so I really wasn't watching TV a lot. Only caught sporadic episodes here and there, but I know Deric was a big devotee of it. And we had just finished working on our previous show, a CW show called Legacies. And we're kind of looking forward to some downtime, looking forward to some quiet time. You know, we've been working really hard through the pandemic and everything. And, Deric had put in a call to our agents hearing that, this new Quantum Leap series is happening and they may be staffing. So, they put the feelers out. They sent out a sample of ours, and we were able to get a meeting with the co-creators, Stephen Lillian and Brian Winbrand. And obviously Martin Giro, his production company read our material, and we had a meeting. And that's how it began. And Deric, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, we. Well, let me preface by I was excited about it, and Ben.
It's not that
Ben
I wasn't excited. I was just looking forward to a little break.
Like,
That's all.
Yeah, but you didn't. I mean, but you, like you said, you didn't watch the show. You didn't watch the original series.
I wasn't a diehard. I was not a diehard.
I knew all about the series, and so I was very much very curious. I wasn't so much excited, but then read the pilot script and was like, oh, we definitely should take a meeting. And so we met with Brian and Steven, who are also a writing team. We just hit it off because it was I think it was one of our first times that we ever had a meeting with a writing team and for a show that was running a show. So it was we had so many just similarities, and we were just really, just, simpatico in that way of we were oh, we walked away from it was you know what, even though we said to ourselves that we were going to take some time off and just work on our own things, I was we'd be remiss to, not leap at this opportunity. And then
Unintended.
they felt the same way. And we got the offer to come aboard and join the show. And so we were right there from the very beginning after they had already greenlit the pilot that was shot, that was originally shot, that eventually became another episode, because then what happened was that the studios and network decided that wasn't the right way to launch the first season of this show, and they wanted to give everyone a chance to try to figure out another way to do it. And that included it was the original pilot was shot up in Vancouver. And so we were, told hey, actually everything's going to be shot down here in LA. And so that was another reason why we were excited about working on a show, because this will be our first show that we've ever had a chance to work on a show that's shot here in LA. And so it changes everything, when it's in your backyard, literally less than 15 minutes away from where we live, it's, you're on the lot. That makes a big difference versus traveling, the air travel, hotel, and just being someplace else all the time for whenever you're working on your episodes. So we, it just all sort of came together, and we're very excited. And so coming on board and working with the rest of the staff, then it was just go from season 1 all the way up until now. Actually, I mean, there was a little bit of downtime.
Going.
Yeah, we're still going. Yeah, we're still going. There's a little downtime for about a good 5 months, but that was for another reason.
I'm really curious, just kind of looking through your journey since that point up to today. I may be putting words into your mouth, so tell me if I've got this wrong. But you wrote Salvation or Bust. Neither of you are around during the Old West. You wrote a medical drama. I don't believe either of you have personal medical backgrounds. And then we have One Night in Koreatown, which appears to be a more personal story. It's something set in Los Angeles. Is this episode this week something that is more relatable for you? And if so, why did that come after 2 episodes that are maybe pushing the bounds of creativity for you both?
Well, to give you a little context for the different episodes that we have written. So Salvation or Bust, came about right after Brian and Steven, left and Martin, took over in earnest, and he really wanted to do a Western. And ironically, the spec script that everyone read that got us this job was a Western. So it sort of all fell into place for us there. While we were on set making that episode, the room was breaking episode 10, and we were just working on shooting Salvation or Bust. And then on the last day, Martin was like, hey, we've got, this episode broken. You guys did such a good job with this one. Would you be willing to write the medical one? And we're like, okay, well, neither of us have any expertise in that arena. And, other than having watched numerous episodes of ER, or Grey's Anatomy, and he's like, I think you guys are going to crush it. And we're like, well, okay, now our job is to crush it. So, we always look at any story we're given as a challenge. And if it's something, whether it's in our wheelhouse or outside of it, we always look to push ourselves to another plateau of our ability. Sometimes our reach exceeds our grasp. Sometimes we manage to, stick the landing. And I think with that episode, I think I can speak for both of us. I think we're particularly proud of it because, The Room did an awesome job of breaking that story and giving us most of the raw material we needed to sort of fine tune things here and there. But when we sat down to actually write it, it's funny how you realize the things you have inside you that you didn't know were there. That, yes, I have no medical experience whatsoever, and which is why we tried to keep the schmiance to a minimum, and really sort of focus on the characters and the emotions, which is what this show does so well, which is what the original did, which is what we are the inheritors of that legacy, and we tried to carry that forward. With One Night in Koreatown, that's something that we had. There is a much more personal side to it, and it starts with Ray, because he's the one that really wanted to do a story set in this time period. And he said it throughout in season 1. And so when season 2 came around, Derek remembered he'd said that when it came time to pitch out ideas at the beginning of the season, what do you guys want to do? This was like, okay, we would love to do this one. And, thankfully Martin and Dean said yes.
I have to think Derek, as a huge fan of the original, one of the touchstones for me of the Legacy series is Black on White on Fire.
Mm-hmm.
I can't
Deborah
help but
Platt.
think of that when I'm watching One Night in Koreatown. Was that an inspiration for you when it came to how you wanted to approach this episode?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was an inspiration, and all credit goes to Deborah Pratt. That was her episode, and it's a very important episode in Quantum Leap lore. But it was interesting because in that case, it was like Sam leaps into the body of a person that's a black man, right? And so we already walked in those shoes in that story, and it was like, again, having Ray be the star of your show, and being Korean American, having the experiences that Ray has had, living in LA, being at that time, and I have a lot of friends who also experienced that. It was, being half Asian, it was very important for us to want to have the Asian Americans POV centered in this story. And also the other thing is, so you don't want to just do what has already been done. Right. And so that with the LA Watt story, in this case of this with the LA uprisings, it was an opportunity to basically say, okay, how that was done versus what we want to do here, and make it completely different, but also still be relatable. And that was our focus.
So, I mean, just to follow up, were there any special considerations that you took into when you were trying to figure out the points of view? I mean, for it to be set in Koreatown, what kind of research did you have to do? And I'm just curious to know, like, how you got the characters you got, because you had a fairly wide representation of different types of people. Mm-hmm. And it was also a story that was very adept at dovetailing into Magic's backstory, which was a nice way to bring the project side into it all. So, yeah. I mean, you had a lot of moving parts that you were thinking of, and I feel like at the heart of it, aside from Ernie and Raymond, was C.S. Lee.
Oh, C.S. Lee was fantastic. That's great. It was great. He was very excited to embrace this role, and also bring his own experiences and knowledge. And breathe that character into life. And it was very, it was like everybody that came in and that, was played from Danny Kane to Benji Flores to Annalisa, they were all fantastic, and they brought something, unique and a great POV to those characters in a way that, when you're on the page, you're hoping that it's all going to work, because it's a balancing act, right? Because you have to tell the story that is what the episode's about, but then what's it really about? And then on top of that, still service what Quantum Leap is about. And then, so it's very much when we're putting it all together, saying like, okay, what's going on here? how does this tie in, especially with Magic, and then when you're writing for Ernie Hudson, again, Ben and I, we can't sing his praises enough, and just also be very excited because we're big fans of his, to get a chance to write for him. You want to make sure you want to write something, fun and exciting for him. And it was a great opportunity for, to explore Magic a bit more too. So it was, there was a lot of that. And, but early on, we were just like, okay, let's just make sure that we get this story straight. So there was research. There was also talking to, again, like I have a lot of friends that were there. I was not there at the time. I was actually stationed in the military. I was elsewhere, but I was watching it all unfold. And with my fellow Marines, we were all watching it and wondering, like, how is this going to affect, and if it's going to spread in the way that, could possibly, you start hearing rumblings, and also to the point where they had to put us down on lockdown in the base because they were worried that there might be sort of uprising at the base and stuff like that. So, then it's just in general, just being in Los Angeles, and, also our fantastic director, Tamika Miller, who also was able to bring her unique POV and perspective into this, and breathe life into it in a way that just makes it, our whole intent was just to try to make this authentic as possible in the given amount of time that we were able to do this episode.
I feel like you pulled it off, if that's any consolation to you.
No, thank you.
We've touched a couple of times on Magic and Ernie Hudson, and I'd love to delve into that a bit more, because I think it's fair to say one of the views that we've had on the podcast ever since day one is you've got a fantastic actor there in Ernie Hudson who is bringing a lot of gravitas to the role, but not doing much apart from asking other characters to explain things. And in this episode, we get this double whammy that we're discovering this new side to him, and this weakness that he has, and that whole plot line that's going to go on, and also his experience with the race riots. And I'm interested in how that came up in the writers' room, and how that came up when you were breaking the season. Was there a plan to have him have a battle with alcoholism that was going to come up at some point, and it just happened that this was the right spot? Or was it that your episode was being written and you realized, hey, actually there's some things that this could be bringing up, and then the alcoholism came afterwards?
I mean, it was a little bit of both. Yes, to sort of both of those answers. Like questions. We knew we were going to, because we had a 3-year time gap, we had to fill it with the lives of what these people went through. And, Addison's was very clear from, as of episode 2, right? Magic's was, I forget when it came about, but yes, knowing that he was going to be the one going into the imaging chamber, being hologram for an episode, we jumped on that. We're like, okay, this is the perfect chance to sort of dig into it and show the repercussions of those 3 years on this particular character. Being able to tie it into Magic's backstory, during his early days in the military, before Sam ever leapt into him, and, finding that sweet spot window where we're like, oh, the math kind of works out that he might have been around Detroit at that time. And in a freaky twist of fate that neither Deric nor I were aware of, is that Ernie Hudson was actually in Detroit that summer. So he had personal firsthand life experience with it that was news to us after we had written those scenes, which was, I mean, it was just like mind blowing. And it brought another level of personal for him that we were, unaware of him as a human being, as opposed to just the character. So yeah, it was a weird serendipity that it worked out for us that this episode became the crux point for Magic and the revelation of that, of those 3 years, what he was going through, as well as, being able to say, oh, this is the episode where we reveal it. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. It's a storyline. And again, I'm not going to spoil where things go, but it is a storyline that our goal with it, as with all things on the show, is to sort of present the positive side of things, right? To show that the hopeful, optimistic side of things. And, you know, the way Ernie did his arc in this episode, the way he, you know, performed it for us, it was beautiful.
I must say, I'm really glad. I was glad watching the episode, and I'm really pleased with the tease that you've given there that maybe this isn't going to go away. I was personally very worried when he stepped out of the imaging chamber at the end that he was going to be saying, "I've exorcised my personal demons. Everything is fine." And that moment where he steps into the elevator and makes the call is just, it's so beautiful and so true. I won't try and pull any more out of you though, because it sounds like you've already teased a little bit that this is going to come back. I do want to ask one, maybe.
Well, I mean, listen, part of that last moment though is to honor the truth about what people who struggle with addictions deal with, is that it's something that they live with. And so, it would have been dishonest to be like, I'm good now. Yeah. No, of course not. He's still struggling, and it's a process he's got to work through.
There's no magic button for magic. You know, it's it really is. And that's also, again, when you come to the authenticity of something like that, especially when you're talking about a topic such as that, you really want to make sure that you are respecting it, and also the people that are, like as Ben said, that have been, you know, impacted, whether or not it's them personally or people in their lives. And so, you know, you never want to make it just like, okay, in 42 minutes we solved that. Yeah. You know, good job. And then also in the greater context of this episode, again, that's something else. It was like we never wanted to make it seem like that we're solving the issues that are being brought up, right? Yeah. It's like what we're doing is we're putting what right when what's wrong for this family, this character that Ben leaped into, absolutely, but that's not mean that we have solved the issues that, you know, that made that incident happen in the first place, or what, you know, brought them together in the first place. So that was also very, you know, we were very cognizant of that as we were, as just in general, whenever we're writing these episodes, the entire writer's room, everybody is always trying to gauge that, to make sure that we get something that right.
I'm going to ask one more specific question about this topic before I let us move on, because this is something, and maybe something you don't want to answer or can't answer, but it's been bugging me since watching the episode the first time. Was Magic lying about finding an empty bottle at the back of the pantry?
That's for you to decide.
Yeah, I thought you might say that. Okay.
Who says it's empty? No, it was empty.
Well, I have to ask, since we're on Magic and we're on the support network that he's built up over the last couple of years since Ben has been gone, Derek, as a fan of the Legacy series, whose idea was it to ship Magic and Beth? And was it a special thrill to be able to write Susan back into the script and to bring so much connective tissue back to Sam and Al and the original Quantum?
So happy about that.
She's wonderful. And it was also, it just seemed like that's the way it was going to go. And it would be a disservice if we didn't actually try to do something with that, right? It was like we were dropping those hints in the first season, you know, and it's like it was kind of there. So it was saying like, well, what else has happened in these people's lives over these last 3 years since Ben has been missing, right? And it was like, this seemed like the most obvious, like, yes, let's do this. Like, let's, you know.
I seem to. It started. I can tell you when it started, and I don't think we can take really credit for this. I feel like it was our writer assistant, Annalise, who wrote episode 116, which we, you know, Derek and I oversaw the production of. But she's been shipping those two since like forever, and in her episode originally, if you remember when Magic shows up at Beth's house, there was I think in the final edit of it, there was a little less than there was originally. There was a little bit more of a moment between the two of them than what ended up on screen. And that was sort of the genesis of, well, okay, this is where we're going to pick, you know, at least we have some, like we had written something that like, we're not just pulling this out of our asses. Like it was based on something that we collectively decided, let's play that. And even if it didn't make it to air, it was bubbling in the background.
It was the fun moment when Janice like looks and said, "What's going on with you two?" You know, it's like we were like, "Okay, that's the moment. Let's run with that." And you know, it just didn't get shot down. The idea was like, "All right, we're gonna keep going with this and see where this goes." So, you know, when you see him buying the earrings, episode 2, you're just like, who are those earrings for? You know, it's like, what's going on?
Yeah, and we've already said this in the main show, Matt. I told you so. I told you so.
Oh yeah, I know. You were Team Meth from the start. I did not say that.
We've been calling them Meth. That's the ship name for them.
And so a double whammy alongside Ernie Hudson, Susan Deal. Such a great performer from the original series, and then last year we had her show up. She did some work, but we didn't see what she's capable of as a performer until this week's episode, and that was some great stuff. So another great opportunity to see a good actor doing what they do.
Well, I mean, again, as someone who came to the original series later, and you know, watched all of it to sort of get caught up to speed, you know, having her, knowing that there was someone in Al's life that was so important to him, and that person is now in our world. That person is, you know, just as much an appendage of the show, and I mean that in a positive way. I don't mean that in a negative way. That you want to see their story. You want to, you know, they have a perspective on what we do. And because Al was their connection to the world of Quantum Leap, it gives us a different point of view than all of us who are fans of the team, fans of the place. She's got a very different outlook on Quantum Leap and the impact Quantum Leap has on someone's life, which I think is a nice, realistic portrayal of, you know, yes, it's great. We show up every week and right or wrong, but, you know, lives are impacted by what this place is and what it does. And it's not always for the better. You know, it's not so Pollyanna and rose colored glasses. I think it's a great way of mixing a little bit of gray into the black and white.
If I could maybe broaden out a little bit from the specific episode, I've noticed it was almost broadcast through the character of Neil that season 2 of the new Quantum Leap almost has a new mandate. We're going to be doing different kinds of leaps, telling bigger types of stories, different types of adventures. And I'm curious to know, I know that you guys had no hiatus between the end of season 1 and the beginning of season 2, but there is such a marked difference in the feel of the show. And okay, we can use the time jump to sort of explain that, but it just feels like a new show. I've said this is almost like the third iteration of Quantum Leap to me, because season 1 was just such a different feel. Like, if you can speak to maybe broader topics, concerns going into season 2 of where you wanted the show to be and what you wanted to accomplish this season as opposed to last season. I don't know if you had a mandate in the writer's room, or I'm just so fascinated by the creative process because I just see so much more going on this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with, at the top, starts with the leaders. So, you know, we have our showrunners, fantastic showrunners, Martin Garrow, Dean Jajaris. They are, you know, they're the captains of the ship, right? And I think when you have them at the helm, right, it's sort of this idea of coming into season 2, we figured out most of the sort of the trouble spots, the things that worked, that didn't work. And as we roll, and then, you know, and having the opportunity, because we were able to do 18 episodes, you know, it's like you can see the confidence in the storytelling, you know, growing, so that by the time you get to the end of that season, everybody kind of knows what this show is. So then going into season 2, where we had a roadmap of like, okay, this is what we want to see and this is how we want to do it, we were able to just roll right into it. And so I think it was some more it wasn't so much as a mandate as it was like, okay, how do we top ourselves? How do we keep this going? and what works and what hasn't worked. And let's make sure that we keep doing the things that work more than things that don't. And it's still a trial by fire because you just never quite know until it all comes together. Every episode is just sort of, because it's so, like you said, it's so different. And that's what makes the show so much fun. It's like every week is just it's a new treat. It's not, it's never the same sort of story and itself other than the mission and the main character trying to, again, put right what's wrong and trying to find a way back home and the team. But, it's like you have that shakeup that happens, right? That happens from after being 3 years later. So all the characters are kind of in very different places and different starting points. And and you're right, Chris, it's very much sort of like almost like a third iteration of like starting again from the ground floor.
Well, and every season arc is different, right? Like very much season 1, we were looking to really honor and homage the original show, like drawing on things like Leaper X and, the idea that, the memory forgetting, the Swiss cheese brain and all that stuff. Like, going into season 2, we did it. We told the story that we needed to tell that ended up with Ben where he ended up with at the end of the season and set him on the path for the next season. So it's like you can't just keep going back and redoing what you did the first time. You got to kind of push in new directions. And I think, like Derek was saying, the time gap really helped with that. Knowing our characters and our actors better, we kind of have a better understanding of, what they all can bring to the table and what we can do with them, as characters. But the engine remains the same. And that's the thing. So it's like, when the things that you did, you're like, okay, well, that was cool, but maybe we don't need to do any more of that. That makes way for other things to sort of fill the space and put in things that are, it just goes deeper. It's just an opportunity to go deeper with things. And I think this year, I feel like with each episode, we've really had a lot more room and depth, and we've introduced new elements, right? Which I won't talk more about, but yes.
It's okay. We all know Tom's the bad guy. We all
I'm not saying anything about Tom. We actually haven't had a chance to be on set with Peter. 5 was he was not in that episode, so our paths have not crossed.
So we don't know.
He hasn't tried to kill either of us. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Good sign.
Yet.
Good sign.
Well,
I'm really intrigued, sort of on that topic, but maybe more broad. Obviously, season 2 went into production so early. You were filming this back in February. I can only assume you were writing it sometime before. With all that time that's passed and all the episodes of the end of season 1 that have aired since, do you spend a lot of time on social media seeing what the fan reaction is or listening to podcasts or anything? And, okay, have there been any surprises for you with the time that's passed in terms of these first 5 that have aired as a whole, what the response to them has been? Any particularly big surprises?
I mean, we're both on social media. We love to see what the fans have to say. Always curious, especially when people speculate and have theories is always fun. Never going to address them, so don't even ask. But it is interesting to sort of see what people react to. Obviously, the big thing now is the Ben Addison of it all. Like that's a huge thing. Which our show is part love story. So how they're feeling and responding to the love story means a lot to us. To know that they are having a reaction, whether they love it or hate it. It's evoking a response, and that means they're engaged and interested, and that's great for us.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise, the delight is how much people are enjoying this season. I think that's it seems like that every week you're just seeing more people just really enjoying the season, and then also people going back and being able to discover the first season. And really, I think there was the relief of in the first season of like, okay, is this show working? Is this something that's worth turning, especially, you know, winning over fans who were fans of the original series and having, you know, questionable, having those doubts of if this show was just going to be another like sort of cash grab and just not, you know, respecting what came before, you know, if it was really worth tuning in. And then surprising everybody, it was like, oh no, this is a good show. This is a great cast, and I'm excited enough to keep watching it. And so we had, by shifting us to being at an earlier time on another day, also I think really sort of, you know, gave more people a chance to check the show out. And now you have even, you know, more fans joining the sort of circle of where they're really tuning in and having these discussions and stuff in a way that, didn't happen in the first season. So I think that's been a lot of fun and a nice surprise to see of like, I keep running into people like when I talk to them about the show and they're like, oh, I really like that show. Watch that show. Because you just never know in our line of work when you kind of mention the show, people are like, I don't watch TV. Or, you know, it's like, I don't watch your kind of TV, you know? So, but, you know, 9 times out of 10, when I say, Quantum Leap, people are like, oh yeah, I know that show. I really like that. You know, my family likes that. And that's really nice, because that's what, you know, at the end of the day, we want to write stories that are entertaining and, you know, for the fans, for people, not just for ourselves.
So one thing that struck me over the course of the last 5 episodes is we see a very definite arc for Ben, in the sense that we have the premiere episode, Matt and I are on record, we think it was spectacular because it was so different from the last season. It was just Ben by himself up to his own devices and solving the leap. And then we had the jaw-dropping reveal at the end. Then we had the other side at the project, and now things are coming back together. I'm really very curious about when you guys are in the writer's room breaking the season. You know that you have a certain number of episodes and that you want to hit certain goalposts for the characters. I guess all the characters have specific arcs. How do you determine what you're going to pepper in where? Because I felt like in this episode, we saw Ben actually come to accept the fact that he made a choice that put him in this situation. At first, he was mad at Addison for not waiting, and then he was just angry at the world for the situation that he's in. And in this one, he tells Magic, I made my choice, and that's why I'm here. And it seems to me like we're seeing like a continual arc, continual growth. We've seen different stuff for Ian and Rachel in the last episode. Now we have some stuff for Magic. So when you guys are breaking the season, do you just have like broad ideas of where you want the characters to be or highlights that you want to hit, and then you sort of weave it into the leaps that you want to tell? Or how does that whole process work?
I mean, it starts with the episode order. When you know how many stories you're going to have to tell, and figuring out the timing of things, because our first 8 episodes lead to a mid-season finale. Like, okay, that right there is a big determinant on the structure of what those first 8 episodes are going to be. And obviously along the way, you figure out certain things. You kind of know the beginning, and you probably know the end, and then the question is, what's going to be the middle that gets the character to that point at that end? Where our story fell, obviously, was, post a big turning point between him and Addison. And it's funny because, being that this is the second season in a row where we've written the 5th episode, which comes after some sort of romantic reveal between those, or a romantic change between those two characters, we've kind of gotten the sweet spot of like, cool. That means we don't have to talk about that particular story. We can sort of put the brakes on it, shift the focus to slightly other things, and do some wilder shit. But not that we don't want to. It's just, better minds sometimes are equipped to tell those stories than we are. And we're happy to let, those people tell those stories. But in this case, what was interesting to us from the Ben standpoint was, okay, what does life look like post Addison as hologram, right? Like he's already had to face the reality of, in the real world back home, life is without us together. So now here in this life that I'm living right now, from leap to leap, I'm on my own. I've got to start over. I've got to have a new beginning. And that bit of growth for him opens the door to where you'll see the next few episodes go. So it's really, it really depends. Like I said, it's that starting point of here are our numbers, then our numbers determine how creative we get with them and where things happen.
So we talked a little bit about the arc that is progressing up to the mid-season point. Are you guys starting now to look, with the writer strike now over and the actor strike hopefully coming towards some sort of conclusion? Are you, as a team, starting to look at what you might be filming next?
I will say that the day after the strike ended, we were back, pretty much practically back in the room, picking up right where we left off, because we had, when the strike first started, we were working on 6, 7, and 8 at that point in time. And so 8 was the last shooting those. So it was like 8 was the last episode that had a script that was ready to be shot and improved. And, it was, so we were able to get those 8 in. And then, at that point, those 8 are the ones that are airing currently right now. So we are now working on the next episode, a couple episodes, getting those ready, and we hit the ground running. So we're already trying to figure, we've been talking and figuring out like the rest of the season of what's going on. And like I said, fingers crossed that the actors, they've been out there every day. They were out there every day with us. When they came in, I think they came and joined us around day 80 of our strike, 80 something. Mm-hmm. And, so, like hopefully they get a great deal, and, maybe this will be a different story in a week from now, of where things are going. Cause it's very much a interesting sort of thing of coming back in, figuring these stories out. But the problem is you get to a certain point where you don't have actors. So what do you do, and how do you, it's like, so you have to sort of plan accordingly. But as the writers, we're just, our plan, our goal and mission is to figure out the rest of the season, make sure that tracks. And so coming back into it, we were able again to sort of have that sort of unique opportunity to say, like, okay, those first 8 episodes that we did this season, these are things that we're working. This is stuff, but there's other things that we need to figure out, and we need to make sure that we figure out going forward. So like, without getting into it, without spoiling anything, there are definitely storylines that you have to sort of like lay out. But if they're not tracking, then, this is where you have to sort of like get it right before you start putting stuff out. So that's where we are right now. All the writers, we're just working. We're happy to be back at work. We're happy to, so happy to be just working on the show again. And hopefully everyone else will be able to come back, and then we'll be able to keep making fun stuff happening.
We all hope so. And I think I'm kind of going to ask the inverse of the question I asked earlier. This break, one of the things that it's afforded you is, I guess you're going in now to look at these episodes, which will hopefully make up the back half of the season, having seen how the first 4 or 5 episodes are responded to on social media. So is the fan reaction likely to have more of an impact than normal on those back episodes? Since I guess you'd normally have been going in planning out 13 up front.
Yeah. I mean, you can't just say, oh, the fans don't want us to do something, so we shouldn't do it. That's not, it's not really how it works. Like I said, it's something we always take into account, how people react to things. And if something were, egregious, maybe you course correct, but based on response. But we're, there's a certain logic to what flows from what you've set up, and you have to honor that story. And we, as a room, have done our diligence for these characters in the season, and knowing where we want it to go and how we want it to end. We've known that since we started talking about this season. So all we can hope for is that the fan reaction is positive. And in the places where it's negative, that's not something we can control, you know, like that's something, you know, we respect it, and everyone certainly has the right to disagree with stuff. We hope they don't. When they love what we do, it's incredibly gratifying. We always want that, you know. We're writers. We love positive feedback. Nobody likes negative feedback. But you know, at the same time, you know, we exist as the writing staff in service of the show and the characters, and telling the best possible version of their adventures that we can.
Great answer, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I guess it's such a weird time to be a writer, because I think historically writers have written in a vacuum, in the sense that it was your show, you were in the room with your team and you did what you did, and maybe you got a letter or something, and now you can watch in real time as people react to your show, and maybe you're not even done with the season. And does it mess with your head, in the sense that, well, we thought we had something good here, do we have to pivot, do we have to course correct or whatever? And maybe there's a little bit of that, but staying true to the vision. If I can say, you know, anything about this season, it seems like, I guess that difference I was talking about, it's a much more character-focused, emotionally honest show, I think, than the plot-driven focus that we saw in the first season. And I feel like it's much more akin to the original series, honestly, this season, than it was in the first season, because it was a different type of show. But I get it. I feel like the Leap and the project stuff is being much better balanced this season. And that being said, this is a long way for me to wind you up to. Now, Benjamin, you've seen the original series. You've gone back and watched it. Derek, you're a dyed-in-the-wool fan. Are there other elements or aspects of the Legacy series that you hope that you might be able to incorporate? Or if you had, like, a wish come true? Besides Scott coming back, because, we know that's out of everybody's control. But are there any elements of the original that you feel like you would like to incorporate a little bit more?
Glowing heels.
We'll take them. Yes! Get Jean-Pierre on the phone.
Wow, that's a good reference. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. See, did my homework.
No, I mean, I think the Evil Leaper was the one that kind of scratched that itch for me, where it was like, it was just so much fun. I wish maybe we might have been able to do a little bit more, figuring some things out, but it kind of worked out the way it did. No, I think there's some other things that might, but I'm gonna hold off right now that I can think of. Yeah, it's like I'm like thinking. There's one thing I definitely want to do, but that will be for another conversation that's not yet ready. So we'll circle back to that.
You got it. I don't want you to pitch your ideas right here to us on.
Yeah. That's all good like that. Yeah. In the Magic 8-Ball, signs hazy. Ask again later.
You got it. You got it. I know all the fans when they hear that there are fellow fans that are actually writing the show. You feel like it becomes like the snake eating its own tail, right? Do they call it Ouroboros?
Sure. Yes.
Right? So yeah. You got to know where to draw that line, and I was just getting a little geeky there.
Yeah, there'll be a moment some years from now where we'll all be watching TV, and all the fans will sit up and say, "That's what Derek meant." Keep an eye out for it. Ben, Derek, you've given us a fantastic insight into what's happening in season 2 and some really great teases for what might be coming up. Is there any final words you want to share with the listeners about One Night in Koreatown or the next few episodes that we've got to look forward to?
I mean, I'd just like to say thank you all for watching. It means so much to us to know that you guys care as much as you care about this show and these characters. And, we always value your feedback, and we always want to hear from you, and love it or hate it. You're the fans, and we are all in this together.
Yeah, it's just so great that, people have been enjoying the show and all, especially after all this time that when we've been putting all this work into it, from the cast to the crew. It's just incredible amount of work that was happening, because they had no breaks. They rolled right into season 2 to try to get ahead, and so that you have these 8 episodes, and to see it all pay off in this way. Like for us, One Night in Koreatown, we didn't get to see a cut of this until 3 weeks ago. And it was like we had to wait until the strike came to an end for us to be able to jump back in and see everything that we worked on. It's like, so it was a rediscovery. And so to see it all come together, it was just I think that I speak for Ben as well, that we're very proud of this episode. We're very proud and just very proud and happy and grateful to be working on this show in general. It's been such a great experience for us, and so we hope that it's been a great viewing experience for everyone else. And so just stay tuned and keep watching, because there's more to come.
Oh boy.
Well, yeah, you absolutely should be proud of this week's episode. And I think the fans are all grateful for these 8 and optimistic for more around the corner. So thank you so much for everything you've done and for your time today.
No, thank you guys. We had a lot of fun. This was great. We really appreciate you when you're reaching out. So thanks so much.
And we're back. Wow. How about that interview? We're getting a good one. We're just getting good interview after good interview. It's almost fortuitous that this actor strike is happening, because we're getting so much great behind the scenes people to interview. Mm-hmm. So it's perfect. Season 2 is all about the behind the scenes people. I want to talk more about One Night in Koreatown. Even though it was a very heavy subject and a very heavy episode, very emotional, they still had the play on words kind of title, which I enjoyed. I guess it's like One Night in Bangkok, right? One Night in Koreatown. That's what came
One Night in Paris.
Yeah. Great movie, great film, underrated. I'd watch it again and again. It was much better than Cats. But one Night in Koreatown, yeah. What did you think about the setup? I was worried going in, like I said, because Black and White on Fire was such a good episode. But what did you think about the subject matter of the Rodney King, the riots? What do you think of it?
Well, I didn't know what it was actually. I think I'm far enough out in the other side of the world and young enough so that I didn't have any memory of it. So do you want to give some context for any listener who might be sort of in my boat?
Well, from my perspective, I remember being I think a young teenager, and that was my first exposure. I live in a white suburbs, so it was like my first exposure to knowing that kind of stuff happened. Because I had no idea police were the bad guy basically until then, because I was in a sheltered environment, grew up, never knew that kind of stuff. I was never in a big city or see that kind of stuff. It wasn't before it was before the internet. So unless it was on the NBC News, you didn't see it, So that was my first exposure.
So my understanding is that there had been a black person who had been arrested, and there'd been quite a lot of police brutality. They'd beaten him up quite substantially, and the police were put on trial but found not guilty. Is that right?
That's right.
Right.
And and it's the kind of thing that happened all the time. As far as the police brutality, the quote unquote difference this time was that it was recorded. It was filmed, the entire beating. It was the 4 cops. They surrounded him. He was on the ground. He was in the fetal position. They were just wailing on him with their sticks. They were like, it was a beating. It was a beating. And like, based on the visual evidence, there really was no defense. Like they shouldn't. It was clear that it was excessive force, but they were found not guilty anyway, and that's what set off the riots.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I for those of you who are merely listening to the podcast, if you can't tell, I'm a Black guy, and I guess I'm about the same age as Albie, late 40s. And I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, so I was familiar with the racism. I personally had never experienced anything like that from the cops, but my dad has. So my, I don't say concern. My worry about this episode was that it was going to be that it was going to focus more on the large scale effects of the event, like the earthquake episode. They had to kind of run through the town, and so you see like the effects of the earthquake. And I didn't want to see them, like have to get home, like try to make their way through the riotous streets. And I'm not saying that necessarily would have been a bad episode. I didn't want to see that. But the way they did it, where they had to shelter and rely on each other, and kind of escape at the end, was I really loved the way they handled that. So obviously the context and the situation of the riots was the driving force, like that was the setting and the to use Tom Westfall's term, the engine of the episode, and I want to talk about that too. But the backdrop of the riots was really more to open up the conversation about racism and prejudice, and these people are prejudiced against those people, and those people are also prejudiced against those people. And when Ian was like, well, it was such a complex story, and there's so many sides. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's so many sides. There's one side. It's obvious. Those are the bad guys.
Yeah.
But they did it in such a way that, okay, I could see how, yep, I get it. I guess it was really well done. And that's part of what I mean by it was well balanced also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the main difference, that it was videotaped, and because it let the rest of the world know this kind of stuff is going on, because before then there was no in-your-face evidence. And I remember as a kid being shocked by that happening and thinking it was like an isolated case, until I grew older and learned more and more and more. This happens every day in the United States. It's horrible. And even up until like I think Magic was saying, whether it's whatever year this was, 1990 or
1992, I think it was
1992 or 2020, like with George Floyd. It's still going on. It's horrible. And during the George Floyd thing, which has a lot of similarity to it, except he was murdered, live on videotape for the world to see. And it was just so heartbreaking. And the fact that so many decades go by and it doesn't change. But then during the pandemic, when we saw like the whole world protest what happened to George Floyd, I mean, every country that I can think of was out on the streets protesting during lockdown. COVID be damned. We can't let this injustice keep going. But I was very proud of like the whole human race finally standing up, and I was hoping something would change, and I was hoping that maybe in my lifetime I'm seeing the end to this horrible systemic problem of this racism, and backed by police departments and the system, as it were. But a couple years later, and it still seems to be just as bad as it ever was, and it's just so disappointing.
Yeah. And this is why I'm glad we've got you on the episode today, John, because you can provide a perspective, having had, some sort of a lived experience that Albie and I obviously haven't. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I haven't experienced like racism, obviously, but I wasn't ever wrongfully arrested or beaten by the cops, or wrongfully detained and beat by the cops. But
Mhm.
and I'm a I look back to, again, I grew up in Birmingham. I live like near DC now, and the opportunities afforded to me are significantly beyond what my parents had, and largely because of my parents, made sure me and my siblings had those opportunities. So my life is nowhere near the struggle that theirs was. Um, but yeah, it is systemic, and that's part of the frustration about it, is trying to convince people that it's like, that me calling out a racist incident or a racist behavior or a racist policy is not me attacking this individual person for being a racist. I'm just following the policy. I mean, I get that, but if we can't agree on, and that's why racism and all prejudice really is so insidious, is because sometimes it is hard to say, well, because the shop owner, right, like Jen, he had a legitimate concern. He does own a sneaker company. People do. He is in the heart of the city or whatever, and people would come in and steal his sneakers, as they did. But it was also, no pun intended, colored by his prejudice. Okay, well, make sure you watch the black guy, because he's the most likely to steal.
Yeah.
Even though he hadn't actually done anything. So that's yeah. This episode did not pull any. This episode did not pull any punches, and it's a masterpiece because of it.
Yeah, and Jin was also the one at the start who said, "Well, of course they were let off. They were only doing their jobs." And I'm like, "No, their jobs don't involve beating a man senseless 4-on-1. It's yes, if the person committed a crime, and I don't know anything about the situation, but if that's the case, yes, he needs to be arrested. He doesn't need to be beaten. So
there's a big difference between the two. Yes.
Yeah.
Besides all the work that Ernie Hudson did in this episode, I think my favorite part of the episode is when Jen steps in front of Dwayne and says, "If you shoot him, you shoot me," and that was a very touching moment, because we saw him going from his prejudiced, hateful self at the beginning of the episode to understanding that he was wrong and like trying to actively make a change. So yes, it was self-interest because he wanted Dwayne to be able to take his son to the hospital, but it was more of him seeing the light, that what Ben said earlier, that people are more alike than different. And that part just touched my heart so much.
Yeah, I teared up a little bit. And it was the, him shooting his son. That was the manifestation of his prejudice. Like it was only because he was so afraid that he pulled the trigger before he saw who it was, because he had an idea in his head of who it was.
Yeah. So that could also be a very subtle way of the writers saying, in America you need gun control, because the people who have guns are far more likely to either use them on themselves or a family member, accidentally getting shot. So that sort of thing wouldn't happen here in Australia, because we have the laws that you can't have, well, any kind of gun unless you have a real reason for it, and protection is not considered to be a legitimate reason. So
yeah, I think it was well written. It was multi-layered, because it was again, like John, you said, showing what his prejudice had caused, and also about guns are bad. And while that was happening, I was horrified, because just living in the United States of America, you could just go to the grocery store and get killed by a gun for no reason, just because that's the state we live in right now. And I thought at that moment, I was like, I wonder what Hayden's thinking of this episode, and like the perspective, not having the systemic racism like we do in America, and not having.
There is systemic racism. I'm not going to.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Do you have any kind of parallel in Australia? And what was your view on this?
I don't know if you know, but on the 14th of October, we had a referendum here in Australia, and it failed miserably. The referendum was to have our First Nations people recognised in our constitution, and to set up an advisory body that's constitutionally enshrined, which would have meant that it could never be removed. It could be changed and muddled around a bit, but there would always be some sort of an advisory body around to ensure that any proposed laws, there'd be representatives of Indigenous people to say this is how these proposed laws are likely to affect First Nations people. It was only supposed to be, someone there to provide advice and to, with those added voices to get around any possible adverse effects that might end up happening down the track, that obviously people who aren't in that situation wouldn't think of. And yeah, it got defeated miserably because of systemic racism, especially from our conservative side of Parliament, who would refuse to back it, and making out that it was divisive and based on race, which it isn't. But yeah, the division was caused by the no camp and also by the yes camp. Our government, who was pushing for it, didn't explain it very well, didn't actually have a model in place that was going to kind of explain to the people what it would be representing. And there just ended up being so much misinformation and disinformation out there that people were too scared to vote yes for it. And obviously a lot of that was done by very, very racist people who don't want the Aboriginal people to have a voice. So there is definitely very systemic racism in Australia as well. I'm not saying that people who voted no are racist, but I will say, the messaging needed to be much, much clearer so that it would convince people that there was nothing to worry about. It was a very, very sad day when it failed, and I don't know where they're going to go from here, because there was no other option, really. I figure if you're going to promote no, then you have to have some sort of an alternative available, and the only alternative now is stagnation and what we already have, which isn't working. So, like, the gap is not closing. So there's very bad things going on here at the moment. And unfortunately, this has also made our current government look very weak. And I really thought we were never going to get back a conservative side government for quite a long time. But now with this view that, our current government's very weak and having this referendum defeated, I've got fears that we might end up with the very right-wing, conservative, dangerous side of politics in power again. And the whole thing gave a platform to people who should not be on soapboxes spreading misinformation and disinformation, which is very, very dangerous. So
we went on mic a little while ago when I was talking about what's going on with our government, with our Congress, and how it's basically, ground to a halt because, and I'll just say it, because the conservative, and I'll say it politely, the conservative aspect of our Congress is it's just.
Well, we really shouldn't even call them conservative, because true conservatives aren't opposed to change, but they like gradual change. They like things to evolve naturally instead of the head fast, no, nothing changes sort of side of politics.
Well, and it's not even, you're right, we shouldn't call them conservative, because conservative would mean they're reserved. And they are easily the most, radical, and they're not so much trying to change or even keep things the way they are. They're trying to
act in their own self-interest, I think.
Yeah, right. Actively push their own agenda, and are willing to, stymie the workings of the nation in order to do so on a regular basis. Like I don't, there's a very good chance the government is going to shut down again, and it's always because of them, even though they always blame the other side.
Yeah, they're just trying to burn everything down around them. I think that's how I feel.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you tend to find in American politics in particular, I'm someone who does get very interested in politics, and not just from my own country, but American politics as well, especially because what happens in America affects the rest of the world. It affects me. You do tend to find that the vast majority of people in Parliament really just want to stay there. The most important thing is that they get re-elected. They don't care too much about what goes on in the meantime.
Hayden, how about the guns? The perspective of the guns in this episode. Was that any? I know you're probably used to guns in America, but is it like watching the Wild West or something like that?
The way I see it, you can't put a gun in a mentally ill person's hand and not expect them to shoot someone. And let's just say the gun culture in the USA to the rest of the world looks like mental illness. So that's my perspective on it.
I like it. Good perspective.
It's not. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, no, not sorry to any gun lovers. But look, the fact of the matter is, it's 50% of people will agree with me. The other 50% disagree, but probably 40% are just like, he's entitled to his opinion. It's really only the very extreme 10% that's got this mental loop going on in their heads saying, you don't like it, you don't live here. You don't like it, you don't live here. But I'm like, no, your First Amendment gives me the right to say whatever the fuck I feel like. So.
Every time they take a poll about, should there be more restrictions on, registering and tracking firearms, and, what kind of guns could be available to the general public, there's like the vast majority is always in favor of it. It's like 80-something% just, yes, there should be more gun laws, or the gun laws should be enforced, or yes, there should be a waiting period, or a more comprehensive registration and more penalties for people who sell guns or own guns that violate those rules. Like, it's always the vast majority. But again, much like our government right now, it is the most extreme of the people in power who are blocking any efforts, and there was an actual cost of human life on a daily basis because of it. I'm assuming everyone has seen the numbers of gun deaths in America compared to everywhere else in the world. It's not even, it looks made up. It looks fictional. It looks like if someone had written a story about, like, there was a science fiction story about, this one little nation where this thing happened, thousands of times a day, and it didn't happen anywhere else. Like, it wouldn't seem believable. And yet I live in DC and Albie lives in Florida. So yeah.
Number one cause of death for children, I think, in the United States, right?
I don't know, but I wouldn't doubt it.
It's a scary statistic. I'm on the far extreme where I believe all guns are bad. Get rid of all of them. I wish I lived in a country that didn't have guns, because you just every
look,
time
we
you go
have
to the
guns
grocery
here. We
store-
just have to have a real reason for having them, and protection is not one. We're not so pussy that we need a gun to protect ourselves.
Every time we go
use
out,
our words and our fists.
I actively think about it. I'm like, before I take my daughter somewhere, like to a parade or to a march, a political event, or even a barbecue, I'm like, is it worth the risk? Is it worth the risk? And a lot of times I say no, and we stay home just because you don't know.
Yeah, you said like you're extreme. I don't think that's extreme. It's been made to seem extreme by the people, who don't want to change anything, by the gun lobby and the people who support the gun lobby. But it's how most of the world lives. And like Canada has guns. They just regulate them. It's not, there's no, as you say, Hayden, there's no good reason for the average person to have a weapon. Certainly not the weapon to the caliber, no pun intended again, that we have. There's no reason for me to own an M16. There's just not. But if I wanted one, I could probably get one easily. I don't have a record. Like I could, I'm a responsible person. I've never.
You probably wouldn't even need to wait for it.
No, probably not. And I could, and that's even me going through like regular channels. I could just go to a gun show and go get one. It's
See, I go to the gym for that.
You want a ticket? You want to ride?
Yeah. Well, look, while we were on the subject of all these, really big issues that this episode brought up, if anyone wants anything lighter to watch, there's an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's called The Gang Turns Black. I don't know if either of you have seen it.
I know the show. I haven't watched many episodes.
Yeah. Well, the episode is actually it's entirely a Quantum Leap spoof, the episode. All right. And what ends up happening is the group gets struck by lightning, and when they wake up in the morning, they find that they are now in the guise of black people. They look in the mirror like in Quantum Leap, and they see black people coming back at them. And it's all about learning what the rules are when you're, a different race, essentially. Obviously, it's a very funny way that they portray it. And Scott Bakula also has a cameo in it, and they talk a lot about Quantum Leap in the episode. He even sings a song. So, yeah, it's well worth watching. I think it's the first episode of season 3, maybe? Can't remember. It's on Disney Plus anyway. It's well worth anyone who wants a good laugh to watch it. But it does bring up some very, very good points as well in the episode too, because obviously the systemic rules are different for different races, and it shouldn't be that way, obviously. No. Yeah.
I feel guilty a lot. Like when I go out driving, if I get pulled over, the worst I'm going to get is a fix-it ticket for a taillight or something. When I see those lights, I don't think, oh my goodness, is this it? Am I going to die? And nobody should have to feel that. No one. And I feel guilty that I am privileged, that I don't feel that different things. Along those lines, there's a great thing I just thought of when you were saying that, Hayden. Eddie Murphy did a thing on Saturday Night Live way back when, where he got made up to
White
be
like me.
Yep. And, he'd go into just the local convenience store and he wanted to pay for his newspaper. And the guy's like, what are you doing? Nobody's here. You're white. Take the paper. and then he went to the bank for a loan, like in Pool Hall Blues. And they were just like giving him stacks of money and say, yeah, don't sign nothing. Don't worry about it. It's horrible, but I don't know if it'll ever be solved in my lifetime. Hopefully, eventually. I don't know how. Yeah. Just maybe future generations learning and getting smarter and being more loving in the future. That's all I can think of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did want to ask. Sorry, go on, John. Sorry.
When Barack Obama was elected, I was like, okay, all right, that is a significant. All right, I feel like we're on the right track. And again, it's not that black people want to take over everything. I'm speaking on behalf. we all send the memo around. I'm allowed to speak on our behalf. I told them I was going to be doing this podcast. So like, go ahead. You can tell them. You can tell them what's up.
Yeah.
But no, it's not like it's so. It would be so easy. Like we, and not just us, not just the Black people, but various minority groups. Again, the First Nations come to mind. Would be very justified if there were to violently retake quote unquote what was ours or what was owed, and nobody wants that. Like it's not the reparations would be nice and I think it would be fair, but honestly no one's expecting it. We're just like, you know what, we will give you a mulligan largely on the past 400 years, 500 years, whatever, water under the bridge. We're not going to hold a grudge. Let's just start fresh as of today. Yeah. And we'd be fine. That would be great. Yeah.
To just be treated the same way as everyone else.
That would be great. Like anything that's okay. Well, see, this law is clearly racist because it was written in 1900 and it targets this group of people specifically for no good reason. So let's strike that. There really shouldn't be this much animus. There really shouldn't be this much resistance to what ostensibly the thing that the people are fighting against it say is what's most important to them, which is fairness and justice and personal responsibility and all that stuff. Like no, we don't need to be bound by the laws because we're good people. We got it. We don't need a law to make us do this because we're good enough to do it. Well, no, you're not. Like, and it's not like you personally aren't. It's just like people aren't. And even if you think they are, historically, statistically, scientifically, empirically, that's not the case. It's just not the case. And if you feel like you would do it anyway, why not just say on the law that you'll do it? Why not just codify this thing that you propose to support?
Yeah,
but it's
absolutely.
Yeah. I don't have I don't really know where I'm going with that. But it shouldn't. I feel like yes, it's a complicated issue, but it's not that complicated. At least it shouldn't be. The way they presented again in this episode, they showed how it was complicated and why it was complicated. Because yes, Jen was prejudiced, and he thought it was going to be a Black guy breaking in, and so he fired. But also, people broke in. Like he wasn't wrong that like there was a riot going on and people came in to loot his shop.
Yeah.
Like so it's not as simple as like, oh, he was racist and everybody would be cool. Otherwise, I think no, there was a riot. He was completely understandable why he would want to protect his place. Yeah. And again, that's one of the things this episode did so well was it wasn't just him saying racist stuff. And well, clearly he's the bad guy. Well, not the bad guy, but clearly he's old fashioned, right? He's like, no, he had a legitimate reason to think the way he did. And he was in fact proven right. And the cops, I guess of the various groups were presented as the most just, the baddest with the least justification. Mm-hmm. And I personally think that's probably correct. Yeah. That they were, but also they were doing their job. They were doing what they were told to do. And I'm not, I feel gross even saying it because it sounds like I'm defending their behavior or their actions and, pulling the gun and looking for the Black guy. Cause I'm not. And I like, and I really like the line where, when Magic was like, okay, we need to go find this Black kid. It's like, okay, what does Ziggy say? Like, it doesn't matter what Ziggy says. I know for a fact that right now, if they find that kid, he's gonna get hurt or killed. Like, I don't need Ziggy for that. And that is,
he's exactly right.
It's exactly right. And like you were saying, Albie, like you are aware of the fact that you can get pulled over, and it probably won't be a thing. I am aware of the fact that I can get pulled over and it probably won't be a thing, but there is also a very good chance if I get the wrong guy pulling me over or the wrong person pulling me over, it could definitely be a thing. And I'm trying to, I've been watching a few things. I'm trying to remember if this is the episode where someone asked, does he know the rules or something, like, and correct me if, cut this out if I'm thinking of something different, but I wish I could remember the context. So, but basically, do they know that it's not safe to go out or something like that? And just like, yeah, every black kid has had that talk from the age of 10 or something like that. And
yeah,
it's kind of true.
In this episode, Jen asked Magic, wasn't there something you could do to defend yourself when he was pulled over and beaten? And
Right.
That's when Magic said, no, every a black kid is told by his parents or whatever that you can't defend yourself because you're immediately wrong, I guess. It's just horrible. And that was good to have Jen ask that question because she was like, for the viewers at home that doesn't understand this, that doesn't live this systemic racism and hatred every day, that, well, can you defend yourself?
No.
No.
Rodney King. That was the perfect example of, and I think I feel like a bad black person because I don't remember that, but I believe I think it was just like a traffic stop. I mean, it was, but it was because he's a big black guy. They felt more threatened, or that's what they said. We needed to subdue him, and he was a big guy, so we needed to use extra force to subdue him. Even though, again, it was recorded, he's clearly huddled in the fetal position.
Mm-hmm. I think they handled the cops correctly in this episode. I think LAPD has a worldwide reputation for being like the most racist and horrible police department on record, So,
Hayden, as far as a big city, anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure they're all.
I don't even know that.
I'm sure they're all.
And I don't even know
they're famous for it.
It might just be the one that gets the most. The most
press,
viewing,
maybe. Though. Yeah. I really like this discussion, this segment. In the next segment, I'd like to talk about some other stuff that happened in this episode, not just the heavy stuff. We'll get to different crazy theories and just different things we noticed. But before that, we have another interview to go to. So let's go to that interview now. We'll be right back. Hello, Leapers, and welcome back to the Quantum Leap Podcast. I'm Albie, and with us today we have Sam from Fate's Wide Wheel. Hey, Sam.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me along. I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you for being part of this. This is really special. We have the director of One Night in Koreatown. We have Tamika Miller. How you doing, Tamika?
Great. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to talk to you, and sorry about the short notice, and thank you for making time in your schedule for this. I'm going to spoil it right here. This is my favorite episode of the new series so far. So it's really a treat to get to speak with you. But before we get to talk about One Night in Koreatown, which I'm sure both of us have a lot of questions, I wanted to get an idea, a sense of who you are. How did you, what was that first time in your life when you thought, I think I want to be a director?
Wow. Well, before I answer that question, I'm curious, why is this your favorite episode so far in the sequel of this series?
I think it has, for me, it has a lot to do with the series always has a lot of heart, and that's like my favorite part of it. And I think Ernie Hudson just knocked it out of the park in this episode, and his storyline, and of course having to deal with the LA riots and stuff, and his trauma, and then his past, and then of course being with Beth and all that stuff together. But mostly it was the story and Ernie Hudson, and your directing just brought me right into the story. Like I didn't feel like I was watching a TV show. I felt like I was really there. So it gave me that feeling of like heart and hope, and there was some, a little bit of sadness, and but it was just a really good adventure. And it reminded me more of the original series than any episode previously.
Oh, wonderful. Wow. Wow. Well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we can just end the interview right there.
All right, we're good. We're good. Yeah, like I always wanted to, be a filmmaker, and I make little things. I make YouTube videos and different things, and I want to, I study shots. I listen to directors' commentaries. I do all that stuff. What gave you the bug of wanting to be a filmmaker?
Well, I think I was always a storyteller from a very young age. I actually, my mom is an old movie buff, if you will. So I grew up watching, old MGM musicals, westerns, and it was just something my mom really loved to watch. So whenever she wanted me to just sort of sit and not move as a kid, she would put me in front of, The King and I, or Showboat. So I have a love of musical theater, as well as theater and film and television. And ultimately, I'm a storyteller. I'm a director, writer. So, but it was definitely, looking back on it, shaped as a little girl, as a young girl.
I love musicals as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think my first musical was Damn Yankees. That's a good one. It's hard to pick my favorite though. Maybe Chicago right now. I'm not sure. We just saw Hairspray a few days ago at the local theater.
Oh, wonderful.
Did you notice yourself, like, as a young person, like watching the films differently than other people did? Like how it's done, how I would do this? Or did you just enjoy the art form and then decide you wanted to learn how to do that art?
I enjoyed the art form, as a storyteller. For me, I'm all about how something makes you feel, and as a young person, as a little girl, I was just swept away in the production design. I didn't know it was called production design then, but just bringing all the elements of production design and score and choreography, if there was one, and obviously acting together. I was always engaged and always affected, and so for me as a filmmaker today, I'm all about my audience feeling something, so when you say you felt something watching this episode of Quantum Leap, that's the biggest compliment I can ever get, is that you felt something. So yeah, so as a little girl, I wasn't so much looking at the technical because I didn't know enough about filmmaking at that time. But it was really more of like, wow, I really love this, and The King and I, just since I mentioned it, it's a love story, and even in my young mind, I felt something in that relationship, the relationship that was happening between those protagonists. But I will have to say, as I got older and went off to college, I actually thought I would be more of a suit, I'll say, more of a studio exec. Because I had sort of both sides of my brain working for me. I actually started out as an economics major in college, actually. And so I thought I would go on the business school, and, so having come to the industry, getting my start in production. So on the other side, I ultimately worked my way up and line produced commercials before I transitioned into directing full time. And so when I say I have both sides of my brain working, I'm a storyteller, a director, writer, I'm a creative, but I'm also a producer. I also know numbers. I also know what it takes to execute a scene, financially. And so, but it was really early on, I would say, soon after college, and that I realized, it wasn't so much I wanted to be a studio exec. I really wanted to be on the set and being an integral part of the creative and the execution. And here I am doing it.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm curious, especially having such a background in watching films and loving films. Who are some of your favorite filmmakers? And obviously the big names are great, but especially like anybody that might fly under the radar, that's just been inspiring to you in some way.
Wow. Some of my favorite filmmakers, I like Sam Mendes. Road to Perdition in particular is a film that I love. I really love Road to Perdition in particular because of the pacing. It's beautifully shot, obviously, but it's a film that really, I think, takes you on this journey, and it doesn't rush. You're not rushed. So. So Sam Mendes comes to mind because he's the kind of filmmaker that typically tells story in such a way. I would say, one of my favorite films is actually Out of Africa. A bit of an epic film.
Yeah.
Sidney Pollack. I just think it's a masterful piece of work. I'm not an advocate for colonialism per se in terms of storytelling, but in terms of just the execution, I think he did a phenomenal job. I've seen Goodfellas. I have to drop Scorsese. I've seen Goodfellas. I don't know how. I think a lot of us have seen it, no less than 20 times.
Absolutely.
The Godfather. So anyway, I can go on and on. I mean, but it's really, there are films, and then obviously there are the directors and filmmakers, and each director for me speaks to a certain thing. So for example, I can look at someone like Spielberg and like, whoa, the attention to detail. I'm a director, I direct television, but I also direct film and I direct commercials. And as a filmmaker, I'm all about the details as well. So I watch films with that kind of eye, today, in terms of, really noticing the production design as well as camera movement, obviously, and execution. I know I've said a lot. I've answered.
No, that's good. I love that answer. I mean, speaking of shots, I mean, there's a shot in the episode in particular which I think is pretty standout, just because the episode itself is very claustrophobic for the most part, and there's very few times that we get out into the world. And the shot, which is, I mean, you can look at newsreel footage from the time, and it's absolute. The veracity of it is perfect. Seeing the Korean American men standing on top of the movie marquee with their guns, and the way that shot just really opens the world up in this way, and it's and with Ben's POV looking up, it's just it's stuff like that is wonderful, and it's those moments where you kind of get to step outside of some of that, and and obviously the detail of everything in the shoe store, and those other moments, but stuff like that I really appreciated, and I was just kind of curious as to I know, having gotten the opportunity to speak with Deric and Ben, I know that was something that was in the script that they really wanted to show. But when it comes to constructing that and actually filming that, I'd be very curious as to know kind of what went into that. What was the thought process behind it?
Well, it all starts on the page, right? So, Deric and Ben wrote a phenomenal script, and I have to admit that when I first got the script and I read it, and, I did a bit of a fist pump, like I literally did a fist pump because, coming into, a television show series, I have no control over what script I'm going to receive. Sure. And, some are better than others. So to get this script of a subject that was really sort of more recent history, and that was so charged, and I felt really lucky to want to get this script. And so, yes, that scene of the Korean store owners on the top of the marquee is written in the script. It's a line in the script, right? Yeah. And so for me, the execution of that is doing my own research, because it is recent history. We can find images and imagery of what that actually looked like in 1992.
Right.
And then, it was important to me that that scene have a feeling of grandness, and, we actually filmed that scene on the back lot of Universal Studios. So we weren't actually on location in Koreatown.
Right.
That would have been challenging in some ways because we really had to have command and control over 3 blocks of a city area, city streets, which would have been hard to do. And so, and so that moment, that scene, it was important to me that we clock, Ben seeing them and our Korean store owners on the top of marquee seeing Ben and acknowledging them. And so, it's a crane shot, it's meant to be shot just with some expansiveness, because you're right, the episode in many ways is pretty contained, so yeah, hopefully that answers the question a little bit. But.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to ask about, I just finished watching The Christmas Lottery. I really loved it. I love Christmas movies, and you just nailed that one. That was pretty good. I really enjoyed it. I got all the feels at the end.
Oh my God, Albie, you're going like way back.
Yeah, I went down the IMDb and I started watching stuff. So, but that's what I just got finished watching. I enjoyed it. And being like a feature film director and going to an established television show, like I've heard directors like Kevin Smith talk about how it's different doing a film versus going into like a machine in motion. So like, could you explain to us, because we're not directors and we're not on the set, what's the differences between like making a film like you do, or then coming into something where pretty much everybody knows what they're doing and they're just looking to you to be the leader, I think, right?
Right. Well, the difference is, in episodic television, obviously as a director, I'm hired to come into a family, a house that is already there. There's a way that the house is run. There are, the people who live in the house live there full time, and I'm just a guest, right? I'm sort of painting a picture, right? Creating an analogy. And so for me, it's really important to, one, obviously know the show that I've been hired to direct. Typically, I will watch the episodes that have been shot previous to mine, meaning in that season, obviously, that have not been aired yet. And then, it's really, my job is to elevate what's on the page, what the writers, what Ben, in this case, Ben and Deric wrote on the page. And if there's any questions that I have, then I go to the writers, like, what did you mean here? This is how I interpret it here, and so the writers are always great resources. But I'm coming into a house that's already firing, right, on all cylinders. And so my job is to very quickly get up to speed, have a great command of the script, because no one, not even the writers, I think, will have as great a command of the script as I will have ultimately, as a director will have, because we're looking at it from all perspectives. It's not just the words on the page, it's production design, it's costumes. I'm thinking about shots, shot lists, how the camera's going to move. So I'm thinking of all these other elements to really help bring this episode to life in a world that already exists. Typically, however, Quantum Leap is special, that every week, every episode is a standalone episode, right? It's a different world. That's unheard of. And so in some ways, Quantum Leap is similar to me directing a film, because it's a world that had not existed previously. Yes, we get the current day, present day headquarters, our characters and their storylines and their arcs are happening. But, with Quantum Leap, I can be, 18th century Western, and here I am now in, early 90s, LA uprising, so Quantum Leap is very unique and very special for that reason. So I would say in this case, for me, it was most similar to directing a feature film because I had a little bit more creative license and control to really help create what that world looks like, which is what I do when I'm directing a feature film. It's all me. Yes, there are other cooks in the kitchen potentially, studio, what have you, but there who have an opinion. But at the end of the day, it's really up to me to really help hone in on the details of that world. And so, so I would say in this case, yes, the short of it is this episode in particular is probably most similar to my directing, a feature film. And thank you for watching the Christmas Lottery.
Oh, I loved it. My mom had already seen it, and she said it was really good. So I was like, I should watch it.
Thank you. I enjoyed making that particular film. It was a lot of
fun. Can't go wrong with Reginald VelJohnson.
Man. Such working with such people like Reginald VelJohnson and Ernie Hudson. What is that like? Just like people that you've seen on your screen and like are icons of the industry, and you get to work with them.
Wow. It's wonderful. I mean, it's like, these men are legends. They're so recognizable and legends. And they could not be more nice. They are so nice. Ernie is such a sweetheart. And throughout my prep process, I like to talk to the actors if I'm able to before we film and introduce myself, without a mask on set, or, just introduce myself and also ask them, how do they like to work, as actors? How can I be supportive of them in doing what they do? And so I got to talk to Ernie, of course, before filming, and we just had such a great conversation and dialogue, and talking about this script and this episode, because he is so featured in this episode, and we really get we really see Magic in a way we've not seen him before, right? Yeah. And Ernie was so open and talking about his own personal experience and what he had experienced, in the 60s, late 60s. And so there were these commonalities, or these parallels, I should say, between Ernie Hudson, the man, and Magic, the character. So it was great working with Ernie on this episode, to say the least, and the entire cast, really all the way around, lovely cast, But yeah, Ernie's an OG and a legend, so that was extra sweet.
Now, I had heard that Ernie was actually in Detroit, during that time period. Yes. And without, I'm certainly not asking you to gossip or betray any confidences or anything, but it was mentioned to me that, the two of you did have a conversation, especially about that scene between Magic and Jen when Magic, tells that story. And I'm really kind of curious what kind of dialogue, you create with the actor in that moment. And that, especially when something like that comes up, that he was actually there. Because that was something that, when I spoke with Ben and Derek, nobody knew. Like, nobody was like, oh, Ernie was there, we can go to him. That they found that out in the course of the making of the episode. So I'm very curious what that dialogue was like with him and preparing for that scene, and kind of, uncovering that fact that he had that experience, if not the exact experience that Magic had, but he had been there.
Yeah, I mean, that was something I learned just in my conversation with Ernie, and look, Ernie while he's, a recognizable face, and, he's a Black man in America, and yes, he did have his own personal experiences, having been in Detroit in the late 60s. And so he knew very much what magic was going through. I mean, he really connected with where magic is in this moment, in the series, and in this episode, and around race relations in particular. And so, yeah, I mean, I wish Ernie could be on here to talk personally about his own experience. So I won't do that, but yes, he did have a personal connection, and he said to me that, after the Detroit riots in 67, Detroit was never the same. Yeah. And I think in some ways LA was never the same, I think, in some ways. Although I will have to say I got to LA a few years after 1992, but like I think everyone, we were all watching what was unfolding in LA. And, and I grew up in Miami, Florida, so a major city. And I think in some ways, in these other major cities, there were things happening that those cities, really connected to LA. They were similar to what was happening in LA. So, but yeah, Ernie definitely had his own experiences and could bring that obviously to magic. And that scene with him and Jen, oh my God, like, it is such a powerful scene. Such a powerful scene. I have two favorite scenes in this particular episode, and that is one of my two favorite scenes. Yeah.
I definitely want to know what the other one is, but before I get there, you mentioned, and this is a question that I had asked Ben and Derek as well. You mentioned not being in LA at the time of the uprising, and I'm very curious to bring your context to the history of the episode and the situation. What was your perspective at the time that these events were occurring in April and May of 1992? And was there an awareness that you had before the verdict came down? Obviously one of the things that unfortunately I think it's more people are more knowledgeable about it now than maybe they were 10 or 15 years ago. But like the Latasha Harlins murder, for instance, that occurred prior to the verdict coming in, and just the tensions that were already existing, surrounding the events of the Rodney King beating and going forward. So I'm curious what your own experience with those events was, and what your perspective on those things was like at the time that this was happening.
Well, in the early 90s, I was a young teenager. I knew what was happening in the world, definitely in the country. And so I definitely remember, we all remember the Rodney King beating in itself, and the Latasha Harlins murder happened about 2 weeks after Rodney King's beating, actually. What we show in this episode is a year after that, right? It's 1992. It's now the verdict of the Rodney King beating that ignites this LA uprising, if you will. And I think for me as a young Black girl, I was pretty astute, actually. And even at a young age, I actually thought I was a storyteller, but I was very, very knowledgeable about politics. I thought, in fact, when I went away to college, I was a double major. I was political science and economics. So that gives you a sense of, where my interests lie. And so this, what was happening in our country in terms of race relations was very much something that was at the forefront of my mind in many ways. And so, while I wasn't living in Los Angeles, Miami had its own, his own uprisings, growing up. So there definitely was a connection, and then, to bring us forward to this year, 2023, and the making of this particular episode, I say that I'm lucky to have gotten the script and be able to tell this story now, because I think, for me as a Black woman director, having a direct, lived, embodied experience, as a person of color, coming to helm an episode like this, I think makes all the difference in the world in how an episode like this is executed, and in terms of what I'm paying attention to, I think I bring a more like multidimensional perspective, a more humanizing perspective of who we are as people of color, as Black people in particular, because this, there was a lot of tension between the Korean community and Black community at that time. And it continues to this day to some extent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, so the short answer to your question is I was definitely having my own lived experience at that time and being old enough to be affected by it. And then cutting to today, it was so important to me that I really stay true to who I think these characters are and what was happening at this time. And also that magic, is unafraid, if you will, to show his own sort of vulnerability in the telling of what happened to him. And then just also see his sensitivity to Dwayne, what's happening with Dwayne, in this episode, the young African-American brother in the episode who himself is a target,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me, and I don't know if it's my place to draw any kind of parallel whatsoever, but I recently I've been reading the new Tupac Shakur biography, and Stacey Robinson's brilliantly written, and she writes a lot about Afeni in the beginning of the book, and about how Tupac's mother, at a very young age, had to get engaged politically. Do you feel that tends to be true for a person of color, that there is this level of engagement? There's almost like a pressure or that if you don't get engaged, that it could be to your detriment?
No, I don't think that that's a sort of a normal or typical thing.
Yeah.
I would say that I am more politically engaged than my mother.
Sure.
I exponentially so. so that I can't make that comparison to Tupac Shakur and his mother, right? Because his mother was very, very politicized, very aware, and so yeah, no, I don't think that that's. I think that as a Black person, I think Black children, as soon as they leave the comforts of their home, as soon as they walk out that door for the first time and walk into a space where their parents aren't with them, i.e. schools, whether it's, preschool or, daycare, whatever that looks like, there's a socialization that happens. There are things that happens to young Black children in the way that we were treated, and not really understanding and knowing, what it meant. But, as an adult, as someone older now, I can look back at a time and say, oh, that wasn't right what that teacher did or said, right? And so but yeah, to answer your question, no, I don't think it's an automatic. Yeah, we need to really be engaged in politics, but there is a survival code for sure. There is a teaching, a learning of, okay, how do we survive in this place where there can be microaggressions coming at us as soon as we walk out our doors as babies, really.
Well, that's one of the things too that's really striking about that scene between Magic and Jen. I mean, Magic in essence says exactly what you just said. You know, as a child, like, you're prepared. You know, you're told. You know, and this is how you have to act. And you know, if the police stop you, and that sort of thing. You know, one of the things that the episode does so well is it offers us some incredible context. Obviously, reaching back to Detroit in '67, you know, or the long hot summer in general, but specifically Detroit. And then of course, you know, taking place in LA in '92. But it's I think it's impossible for a viewer in 2023 to also not be able to further contextualize that in the wake of Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd protests. Was that at all on your mind during the making of this episode, that you have these three distinct periods of time and very recent history, as well as this not so far removed history, and then this further back history, that you know, that this episode is far too relevant in so many ways, and what that context, you know, might mean for you as a director?
Yeah, I mean, it's yes. I mean, obviously, this episode, this subject matter, is very much connected to what we all witnessed in the last few years around the Black Lives Movement. And, you know, or we've seen in old, you know, 1960s footage of the Civil Rights Movement, right?
Yeah.
So these movements, there's a commonality, you know, and really the goal, if you will, is the same. You know, the goal is to be seen. The goal is inclusivity. The goal is equity. So yeah, coming into this episode, you know, I can draw on really recent history, obviously, in terms of Black Lives Movement. But you know, 1992 was, like I said, it wasn't so long ago, so I can go right to that place, you know. And so I look, you know, I also in my own preparation, you know, I was looking at different documentary footage, reading different things to really just sort of help, you know, jog my memory of like, okay, this is what was happening during this time. But yeah, they're all connected. You know, we have a ways to go in this country for sure. You know, to sort of eradicate, you know, racism, if you will. So yeah.
Well, it's striking too, because there's a line that Ernie has during that moment, which is just brilliant, and I love it so much. Is that the sparks of injustice may vary, but systemic oppression will always light the fuse, and no matter how much progress we make, that will never change. And that fear. And you know, it's worth noting that Deborah Pratt penned an episode for the original series, Black on White on Fire, which takes place during the Watts riots, and she wrote that originally actually as a stage play that had nothing to do with Quantum Leap, and then transferred it over to an episode of the show. And that episode was produced in 1990. So even before LA. Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the things that Quantum Leap, you know, does well is to contextualize some of those events sometimes. And unfortunately, as we find ourselves repeating, it is hard and it has to be frustrating. And to see the parallels between Dwayne and Magic, and Dwayne's frustration over Jen's persecution just finally bubbling out, whereas Magic, there's like this, it's very different for him. We've never seen this before. There's like defeat, you know, he feels almost hopeless. And it's like these traumas upon traumas upon traumas, and being triggered by the events that he sees, and Dwayne having to hide under the trash can. You know, when coming to those moments, I mean, obviously, like you said, you want people to feel things. You can't necessarily direct for mood or for feeling, right? But you're telling a story. But I am curious, like, the choice to show that, Dwayne underneath the garbage can and the way that it's done, it was very powerful for me. It was very affecting for me, seeing it from that perspective. And I'm not sure exactly what my question is here. It's a very powerful episode, but I'm curious, kind of when approaching these situations that unfortunately still feel very present. Like you said, we have a long way to go. And I remember as a 10-year-old child watching these events unfold. I was living in the suburb of St. Louis, and there was a little unrest in St. Louis, after the fact as well. Not to mention, of course, what would happen decades later, but watching these things unfold, and at the time, as a 10-year-old white kid in Midwestern suburbia, I was like, I thought we fixed this, like I thought we fixed this. And as I'm watching this and realizing no, and now of course having a very different perspective, approaching this, I'm just wondering what level of sensitivity and what level of perhaps even anger or emotion you can't help but have, approaching shooting some of these scenes.
Well, I never feel angry. I'm hired to do a job, right? First and foremost. And, like I said, I definitely come to this space, having this sort of direct lived embodied experience, right? That is for which I can connect to these characters in a way that you might not be able to, right? As a director, as if you were directing the episode. And so, I think you feel something because I've humanized the characters. You know what I mean? I think that, and this goes to another sort of question of does it matter that Spike Lee directed Malcolm X, right? Could Spielberg have directed Malcolm X? Both would have done a great job. But the fact that Spike Lee is a Black male director directing a story about a Black man and that Black man's plight, and probably has some similar journey, makes all the difference in the world. So for me, as a Black woman coming to tell this particular story, I want to make sure that the characters, all the characters, but definitely the Black characters as well as the Asian characters, or the Latina character, that they're humanized. That there's a humanizing that happens, because a lot of times with other people at the helm, when we're telling the story through another lens, that doesn't always come across because it's not as important, in my opinion. And so, just like it's not as important in terms of the media, I think definitely during this time in the early 90s, the media the stories are told through the lens of the dominant culture, which is white. Imagine had the newscast been told from the lens of the Korean American or the Black American, for the world to see, not just in their communities. Just imagine that, right? And so for me, coming to this script and coming to this storytelling, it's important to me that you, as the audience member, you see yourself in Dwayne. When he's under that dumpster, I was very intentional. With that moment, because I could have had him laying on his stomach, sort of peering out under the dumpster, but it mattered to me to have him on his back. He's fighting for his life. He just needs to get down, and he's on his back, and he's out of breath, and he's, look, it's a 1 hour drama, 43 minutes of television, but in that moment, I'm thinking about what is this young man feeling and experiencing, I'm sure, in that moment of panic, his eyes are closed. He's breathing heavy. He's probably looking up at the sky because he's outside. It's at night. He's probably, he could be in prayer, like, look, don't let me get caught by these cops, So for me, if you felt something, then that means that I've humanized, me and the writing, but in how I'm showing it is all about me humanizing these characters. So you see them as human beings first and foremost, not a Black young man first and foremost, right, but as a human being foremost. And that's the thing that I think we connect with, that's the heart speak, that's when we're able to see ourselves in others.
I think you absolutely nailed that in that part, because I was right there with Dwayne under that dumpster hiding with him. And I felt that fear. And it's not something that in my everyday life I feel, because I was just born the way I was and the world is the way it is. And I don't experience that. But for that moment I did. And I was so affected by it, just thinking of, oh my goodness, for so many people in the world, how horrible it is just to be. And I think it really conveyed that to me and the audience. I really think so. So great job. I think what's a big difference about Quantum Leap today and say 30 years ago is there's a much greater thought process of having the right persons do the right stories, the right storytellers tell the right stories. Do you find that that's in your career, it's more like that everywhere, or is like Quantum Leap an exception to where they actually care about who's behind the camera as well as who's in front of the camera?
I don't think all shows are built the same, So I think that Quantum Leap, clearly is more conscious of who they hire as directors, and having more inclusivity, which makes sense. You're telling stories where, your cast is primarily people of color, and so it makes perfect sense that you would bring, directors who happen to be people of color and women and, queer and, all of those things. Like, that's just, to me, good management. What I mean? It's just, I don't know how else to put it. So, because that's where you're going to get the best storytelling, right? I think, in my opinion, you're going to get the best storytelling and execution when you have different perspectives and not one kind of perspective, white male perspective, which television has been for a long time, and television still is to a great extent. And, unfortunately, and so I think, Quantum Leap is from what I see so far, is definitely one of those shows that is very mindful of who they're bringing into the house, because the inside the house, you have, an ensemble cast where, 2 are Asian American actors, you have a gender non-conforming actor, you have an African American actor, as all sort of co-leads, if you will. So, it's but not all shows are built the same. Not all shows care about that as much. But what do you do?
I wanted to ask a little bit about Black on White on Fire. That was such an amazing episode in the original Runner Quantum Leap, one of the best episodes. And this episode was going to be compared to it, no matter what you did, because it had to do with riots and things. What did you feel any pressure going into this episode, knowing how greatly loved a similar story was in the original series?
No, not at all.
Okay, cool.
I mean, I didn't feel any pressure at all. Yeah, I'm not so concerned about, I'm someone definitely who does my homework and who prepares. I am all about preparation, but I also am a director, a storyteller who believes in my own voice and believes that I can come up with a way to execute the story in a way that is engaging, that it can stand on its own and not be compared to anything else, or if it is, and that's a compliment, then great, but no, I didn't feel any pressure at all. The only pressure I had was, is that I didn't have a lot of days to shoot the episode. So it was just really the sort of the pressure of just, time of like, okay, we only have this amount of time to shoot this episode. And there's a lot happening in this episode. So, but other than that, no, creatively, I wasn't feeling any pressure from anyone, and Deborah's lovely. Deborah was on set and sitting behind me in Video Village, here and there. And she was, she's such a sweetheart and really a fan, and so I'm so honored. I was so honored to get to tell this story, and yeah. So if it's compared to her episode, then hey, I'll take it.
I have a few just comments, questions. A couple of the shots that I really liked in the episode that weren't too heavy necessarily, like was when there was that moment of levity when Jen said, "When did you learn to speak Korean?" After that whole Korean scene. Was it hard to have that moment of levity in all this heaviness around there?
No. No. I mean, it's so wonderful when I get to work with a great cast, you know what I mean? And C.S. Lee, who plays Jin Park, the store owner, such a great guy, so open, so wanting to, it's like, Tamika, what do you need? He's wanting to give his best performance, and he's great at what he does. You know what I mean? He makes me look good. And so, but that moment in particular, it's interesting. We did a few takes of that, and there were a couple of ways that moment could have been done, in terms of Jen's performance. What you see in the episode, I just felt that it was the funniest, because there's another way where Jen could have been more subdued, like, when did you learn Korean? I mean, it still would have had some levity, right? But Jen is a passionate character, from my perspective. And we see these Jen, we see so many emotions from him in this episode, right? But I just think that moment, with his fire and his being charged, it was just appropriate that his delivery of that line be that way. And but yeah, it was an episode that definitely had, a lot of drama, but it was an episode, and this, my hat's off to the writers. An episode like this, you have to have these moments of levity, and such is life. Right? I mean, there are these moments where someone just laughs, even at the most, sad thing that could have happened, and so, but thank you for pointing that out, that particular moment. But it wasn't challenging or difficult. It was an invited moment, obviously, I think, because it's like, oh, this is funny. And we were all laughing in Video Village. So
that's awesome. A couple just comments. I loved a couple of the shots that were so short, but they meant a lot. One was the handhold between Magic and Jen. I really like that. And that one shot of just Ernie touching the glasses, it just said so much in so few frames. Do you know that going into it? Do you see that in your mind before you're gonna film that might be that important and that short and just perfect?
Well, it's interesting because Magic's office on the set, I remember walking to his office for the first time, and there's not a lot of things in the office that Ernie could use as for business, like in acting, the business of and so I was sort of, given what the moment was, like that was just something I came up, like it was there. I say, oh no, I say, do this. I told Ernie to do, just rub your hand. He's not gonna, I didn't want him like pick up a glass and look at, that would be too like, but he's pacing in the room. He's feeling something. And so and we know that this is a struggle, potentially taking a drink, potentially. So, and so that was something in my being in the space. I say, yeah, just do that. Something as simple as rubbing your fingers on those glasses. That's all I needed, right? Because we knew the rest. That's the audience.
It was amazing just how much it told in that few short seconds.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
I wanted to ask about fan favorite Susan Dial coming back as Beth and introducing the relationship with Magic and Beth. What was that whole filming that whole part out? And also, was there any anything that else that was shot of their storyline or other storylines that might have been cut out of the final cut?
Well, to start with the final question, work my way backwards. No, I think everything I shot is in the episode. And then, Susan's lovely. Who plays Beth. And they were great together, Beth and Ernie. There is, it's so strange because like I know the episode has aired, but but I'm so kind of conditioned to not give away any spoilers, right? So I'm like, I don't know how much I should say. I really enjoyed shooting their scene in the kitchen. I really enjoyed that scene. I think it's beautifully shot. The music, there's a lightness to it. It is such a different scene from any other scene in the whole episode, right? Like where we go in this episode is like completely different world from that moment. I don't know if I answered your question, Albie.
Oh yeah, that was great. My final question thought is we spoke with Christina Castro a few weeks ago, and she's the one who edited this episode. And we were talking about how many like different versions there might be and little tiny cuts. Like working with Christina, going back and forth for your final cut. Was that a long process, or did you guys like get together pretty quickly on it?
Yeah, no, typically, and you may already know this, the way it works is that, after I'm done filming, I don't know, a few days later, I will get an assembly from my editor. So I will get, so from Christina, I got what she put together, probably a week later or so. And then I have about 4 days to work with Christina and really hone in on my director's cut, and tweak and take, there might be a take that she thought, was the better take, but then I may think differently, and so, and typically on set, in terms of my favorite takes, the script supervisor is noting that anyway, but things change, when you're looking at an episode from beginning to end, what I thought was the better take on set, there might be another take that actually works better in that moment when looking at the full context, right, of the episode. And so, but yeah, I mean, Christina and I, we work wonderfully together. I don't think I came in and I did what I needed to do, but I think the episode, my director's cut, and what we delivered is pretty much what you see, what aired, So yeah, it was a great process. It was such a pleasure for me to get to work with Christina. It's my first time working with her. It might have been her, I don't know if it was her first or second Quantum Leap episode as an editor, but sort of a newer editor to the show. But it was a very smooth process. Everything was there, right? So it'd be one thing if we didn't have the elements to put in there, but I managed to shoot everything we needed to make everything work. And so, but my hat's off to Christina, because, editors are special, they're able to make magic in those editing rooms. And I think we did a great job on this one.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I want to jump back just briefly to Susan and the inclusion of Beth. The moment between Magic and Beth in Magic's office is pretty powerful for a number of reasons. And I love the fact that as a recovering alcoholic myself, there are moments in the episode that are very easily identifiable. And I sit at 4 months or 4 years, 2 months, and 5 days of sobriety right now. One of the things that I love about this episode, and I talked with Ben and Deric about this, is the fact that we learned that Beth and Magic have been together for a year, 365 days, but Magic's only been sober for 353 days. And I just love that. I really appreciated that. And in the scene between the two of them in Magic's office, especially as a viewer and lover of the classic series, someone who's done a podcast on Quantum Leap for 6 years now, there was a palpable sense that as Beth is talking to Magic about all of this, that it is not just the scene she's playing. She is playing the weight of Al and Sam and everything that came before, and Al's own issues with alcoholism. In packing a scene like that, I mean, I know that obviously the actors got to do it, right? But in putting that subtext in and doing that and creating that moment, I really would love to know what those conversations were like, and what you got from it too, as the director, and seeing what Susan was doing and just kind of being like, there's more to all of this.
That's wow, very, very astute line of questioning, because clearly you're a fan of the show, right? Because that scene, you're absolutely right. Beth is bringing to that moment in this storytelling all of this history, all of this, these past feelings and experiences that she had with Al. And when we did the scene, I'll give you a little insider info. When we did the scene, what you see in the final episode in terms of Susan's performance is not what Susan did instinctively initially, and I went to Susan, and I really I knew that the scene called for Beth to really get to a place that that we don't see Beth at typically, right?
Yeah.
She's a little bit more mild-mannered, as a character. And so I went to Susan. I was like, no, I just kept pushing Susan. I was like, I like, if I'm going to use, sure, angry, but it's not angry. It's fear. It's someone who's afraid, who's really afraid of what is happening, what might happen, what like she's gone through this before, and she loves magic. She doesn't want this to happen again. And so I really wanted you, the audience, to feel in that moment what Beth is wrestling with, and so I really worked with Susan in that scene to get her to a place where magic really felt, her own fear, so much so that he could lose her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that was a scene where, Susan and I spoke to Susan, and I was like, I want you to really go there. Don't just come into that office and confront him. Yeah, I found this, No, like, I want you to come in more hot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I appreciate you mentioning that scene, because it was a scene that I felt as a director, it was important for me to push the actress a little more. We can always bring it in. We all, we have different versions of it, right? Give me all the versions. All of it's good. No, there's no bad version of it, but give me this as well. You know what I mean? And I think Susan did a remarkable job, and she's so lovely to work with. So.
Yeah, it's a standout moment. And one of the things too about the episode that I really appreciated is, of course, and earlier we were talking a lot about history and context and that sort of stuff, which is important to me. And I think it's one of the great things that, as Deborah always says, it's got to have those 4 H's, right? And one of those H's is history. And so I think that that's important. However, to me, and this is obviously my own personal engagement with it, I cannot help but be, touched by Magic's story throughout the episode. And I feel like one of the things that the last couple of episodes of Quantum Leap, the revival, has done is find these beautiful ways to intertwine the project stories and the Leap stories. Before we usually got wonderful parallels, or we got to see what the project was working on to aid Ben with. But this season, and especially these last 2 episodes, the stories are one and the same. You can't separate them. And Magic is in a lot of ways is kind of the vessel for that. And it's really beautifully done. But of course, the story with his issues with alcoholism, there's 2 other scenes that are really worth mentioning, in my opinion. And one is, of course, when he admits to Ben that he's an alcoholic. And this is sort of a 2-part question. One, were you aware, and what was it like collaborating with Raymond Lee, knowing that this was an episode that he had kind of pitched during the first season, that he was like, I want this story to be told. And 2, that moment where, and it's beautiful because we're just on Ben's face. Ben has this inhale, when Magic tells him an alcoholic, and you can just see as though that admission is like this vapor hanging in the air, and Ben chooses to take it on and take the weight of that on the, and shoulder that because it's, I chose to leave. I'm very curious about collaborating with Ray because he's phenomenal, and I just think that the work he's done this season in particular is a cut above anything you normally see on network television, as far as I'm concerned. And so that moment is just so special, and the chemistry between the two of them is beautiful. But yeah, I'm curious about that moment and collaborating with Ray in general in this episode.
Well, I mean, you said it. I mean, Ray is phenomenal. He's a really great actor, and just a lovely spirit. You know what I mean? Like, he's just a really beautiful human being, who's down to do whatever. like okay, and so yeah, that's a really beautiful moment. That scene, and you know, my hat's off to Ray, you know, to your point, because he really does such a great job. Yes, he's shouldering the responsibility. He's letting Magic know, like, this isn't your fault. Like, this was my choice. It was my choice to leave. This is my journey, you know, and there's such a love that these two characters have for each other, love and respect, that is, I think, so clear in that particular scene, you know, that moment, you know, that, you know, there's forgiveness, you know, in the sense of, I think for Ben is saying to Magic, forgive yourself, you know, and it's really, you know, I give props to the actors, you know. Yes, I come in and I have a thought, you know, but they live these characters day in and day out, season after season. And so for me as a director, you know, I think I'm, you know, smart enough to also lean into them. You know, I mean,
sure.
know, to lean into them and let them do what they do, you know. But that was a scene I felt that really came fairly organic. Like there weren't many, if any, adjustments that I made as a director. So it's all Ray and Ernie. You know, it really is, you know. For me, it's about making sure I'm recording, you know, you know, but I can't even remember if I had any adjustments there, you know. They just nailed it. I wish I had more to say. They nailed it. Yeah.
I think that's really lovely, actually, and I love that, and it speaks to, again, that sense of collaboration on a project like this. I mean, yeah, you come in, you're the director, you have to kind of tie everything together and see it from all these different angles, but at the end of the day, you also have to rely on, you know, this person that's, you know, that's lighting this particular scene, and this person that's, you know, and the actors and the writer, and so I love that. I mean, the collaborative spirit of it all is one of the things that I think I appreciate the most. You know, I mean, yes, I love just watching the show, but outside of that, you know, that sense of collaboration, of working together, of coming together, I mean, that's what it should all be about, not just making TV, but life.
Yeah. And I'll just add this one last thing. So this, you know, one thing that as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, you always, like, reaction shots are so key, right? It's not just about getting your coverage and coming up with cool shots. It's the reaction shot. So what you're speaking about in that scene also is Ben's reaction, because his back is turned to Magic. When Magic says, you know, I'm an alcoholic, you know, the camera is in front of Ben, but Magic is over his shoulder in that particular scene. And so, you know, we're focused on Ben's reaction, you know, more so in that moment. And, you know, Ray, again, just does what he does so brilliantly. And, you know, and if there were any, I don't even think I had to give this adjustment because he just knows instinctively. I'm about taking that moment. Don't rush it.
Yeah.
Have the reaction. Take it in. Don't be like, you know, you don't need to. Take it in. What do you know what I mean? Before you make that turn and you're facing magic. So reaction shots. Always get a reaction shot. Directing 101.
Well, it's you know, in that scene between Magic and Jen, I think similarly there's some beautiful shots of Nanrissa of Jen reacting to what's being said that take that moment even further, you know, because it's enough to just hear Magic and Ernie say these things, but when you see her reaction, yeah. Last thing that I wanted to mention is I love the way the episode ends. I love the fact that we come back to Magic and Ernie, you know, getting on the elevator, and we have that moment with him making the call to Beth. One of the things that I love about the portrayal of Magic throughout the course of this episode is that there's no fear, it seems, from the writers, from you as the director, from the actor especially, of allowing Magic to appear vulnerable and in need. And I know sometimes, just with a lifetime's worth of viewing television, that can be hard to do with your principal characters, you know, that we don't like to see that sometimes, and how awful that is, because it should be normalized. And for me, it was an incredibly touching and powerful moment, because he calls her to cancel that dinner and then follows that up with asking her to come to a meeting with him.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I mean, it was a moving moment for me. And I would love to know a little bit about that moment, because again, I feel like it's just very honest and raw and truthful, and that there's not a lot, you know, even the camera work, even, you know what I mean? It's just like, just let it happen.
Yeah. You know, it is a beautiful moment. Thank you for mentioning that moment. And just also thank you for just, you know, speaking to Ernie, seeing Ernie in a way that we don't typically get to see him, right? Which is like really vulnerable. And Ernie and I talked about that too, because there was definitely a discussion on how much of a, say, breakdown do we see Magic have, for example, when he's in the alleyway seeing Dwayne, right? We talked about that. You know, how much of a breakdown do we see? And I think we found that nice balance of like, we are able to see in Magic's face how affected he is without him, you know, falling to the ground kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yes. Right.
In despair. And so to your question about that last scene in the episode, you know, Ernie's just the man, right? I mean, I had a specific way I wanted to shoot that shot, you know, which is very simply, just having our camera a little sort of framing Ernie. How should I put it? Framing Ernie where we're really seeing more just his face. I don't really need to see his body, his torso, but just really more space, and just pushing in ever so slightly, you know. And we know that once that elevator closes, like that's a wrap, like that's the end of the episode, and we've just felt something in that moment, right? At least that's what my intention was. And so I just think, you know, I think we probably did, I don't know, maybe 3 takes of that. Like, you know, like 3 takes, and really it wasn't so much about performance. It was just like wanting to get the camera movement right, making sure the elevator door closed. You know, like it had to be right, like the elevator closing when it needed to close after that moment. So it was more technical stuff, you know, that might have tripped us up here and there. But in terms of performance, Ernie was on it from the first take. And yeah, he knew what the episode was about. He knows where his character is in this moment. You know, we know and we believe, I think as the audience, we believe in the depth, I hope, of the relationship that he and Beth have or having. And I think that moment informs us, you know,
absolutely,
of that depth.
Yeah, no, I thank you so much. I mean, it's a very beautiful episode, and there's some wonderful moments, and I love what it says about, you know, shouldering the responsibility, but also forgiving yourself and being able to move on from certain traumas. And I think one of the things that the episode is so successful at is you feel the weight of the 3 years that have passed for our characters at the project in some wonderful ways, especially for Magic, obviously, but for Ian as well. You know, Ian and Addison have that lovely scene and that idea of forgiving yourself in order to move on. It's beautifully done. There's some wonderful stuff. And of course, obviously the history and the passion and everything that goes into the leap itself, which is wonderful. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I thank you so much, and thank you, Albie, for letting me be here.
Oh, thank you for coming on, and thank you, Tamika, for joining us. It was amazing.
You. Great questions, you guys. I really appreciate the opportunity. Glad you loved the episode.
Loved it. Thank you.
All right.
Hey, I'm Matt Dale, and I am obsessed with Quantum Leap. This show is filled with heart, humour, hope and history, and it's been inspiring me to write for the last 7 years. Now I'm inviting you to support the latest Kickstarter campaign to raise funds to print Volume 3 of a trilogy of reference materials. In 2016, I published Beyond the Mirror Image on Kickstarter to 91 people. The first half of this 800-page book was an episode-by-episode guide to the series. The second half was all the juicy extras, the novels, the comics, a merchandise guide, even a complete timeline to the fictional Quantum Leap universe, and lots more. Last year, I published Volume 1 of a new trilogy through Kickstarter. Nearly 200 people supported me in getting this off the ground. Volume 1 was an 800-page book expanding on just the first half of the 2016 edition, covering the episode-by-episode guide. I also wrote and published Volume 2 straight to print on demand, and that was a brand new guide to the Revival series starring Raymond Lee. Now it's time to revise the second half of the 2016 book, the novels, the comics, and all the other ephemera. I've got so much more to say, and I've run lots of interviews with the key players to find out what was going on in the worlds of Quantum Leap off the screen. Volume 3 is going to be an exciting collection of essays, lists, features, photo galleries, and more, truly celebrating the 35th anniversary. I also have 2 stretch goals I'm hoping you'll help me reach. One of these is a brand new interview with Deborah Pratt, where we'll focus on her life and career up to 1989, and the birth of Quantum Leap in a level of detail she's never spoken about before. After that, we'll be working on something really awesome. One of the comics in the 1990s that was never made would have seen Sam leaping into a technician working on Project Quantum Leap shortly before that first leap. I'm commissioning an artist to bring that story to life on the page, and depending on the stretch, this could be anything from a few pages right up to a full-length strip. Backing comes in 2 primary options, either the standalone book or a 35th anniversary celebration pack. The 35th anniversary pack comes with a signed copy of the book, some exclusive stickers, an exclusive Lego-style minifig, a signed postcard of Colin Howard's artwork from the UK novel Random Measures, a signed art card of the mirror image artwork from Volume 1, and Radio Spirits on CD. Radio Spirits is a 35th anniversary fan-produced audiobook set in the QL universe, written by Christopher DeFilippis, who wrote the acclaimed novel Foreknowledge, and read by a professional actor. I'm so excited to confirm that this audiobook will have a cameo appearance from Deborah Pratt as Ziggy. For the 35th anniversary, we're giving Ziggy her voice back. Radio Spirits is a fan production and will be a freely available downloadable drama. Your backing here will contribute towards duplication costs for a limited CD version available 6 months before its release online. There's also other optional extras you can choose with either tier, including access to a weekly blog where I'll be talking through my process in detail. I got some great feedback from some of my blog-style updates for Volume 1, so I'm looking forward to making that a little bit more robust and frequent. Backers who don't choose this option will still be kept up to date on the progress of the book and printing through the normal means. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey, celebrating the 35th anniversary of our favourite show and completing the trilogy of Quantum Leap reference books, Beyond the Mirror Image.
Wow, what about that interview? That was great.
Right.
So
I'm
thankful
so
for everyone
impressed
being
with
on.
what you and Matt and Chris, all these
The whole
amazing
team.
guests that you're able to get. Yeah.
Yeah, and John sometimes, hopefully. Okay, let's start off with this, Hayden. The last segment was a little heavy, but that it's important that we talk about these things. Otherwise, they'll never get better incrementally. Even, I want to know. Could you please explain to me and John Pythagoras' fifth theorem?
Pythagoras never had a theorem. He stole it from other people.
Well, he wrote it down in his book, right? Could you explain the fifth theorem, though?
I thought we were getting away from the whole racial discussion. Sorry.
It's important because it's related. It's related.
I think all the Pythagoreans were related, to be honest.
Right. Well, I spent the whole day learning about it. That's all. I have a very important question. Shoe sizes. What are you guys' shoe sizes? I'm an 11 and a half wide to 12 wide, depending on the brand.
10 and a half or 11, maybe 11 and a half, depending on the brand. Usually around 11.
Yeah.
It depends on who made them. I just have to try them on and hope they fit and hope they're wide enough. I've got an H width. It's the width that matters, not the length.
Oh, I'm glad.
I'm 5'8" for the record. If you're expecting a taller person.
But how tall are you?
I'm 5'8", but on my license I think it says 5'10". Maybe I'm 5'9", 5'12". Is that a thing? I don't know. But Magic, 6. He's a size 14. How about that? Magic is a size 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
He's a big guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Annalisa, who played Louisa, the nurse, I thought her character was really good. Just because a lot of times in an episode like this, let's say, you'll have maybe Koreans represented, African Americans represented, and it's like two sides. So you can't really get an unbiased third opinion. So it's really great to have like a Latina person in there to just, you guys are crazy. What are you talking about? Stop it. So what do you think of her character?
Yeah, she was good. I also think that her presence was necessary to show that, there's always going to be some collateral damage. Anytime there's any sort of a fight or a riot between two groups, there's always going to be someone else that gets hurt along the way. Because, her car ended up torched, and I mean, she hadn't done anything wrong to anyone. She was going to be more help, being a nurse than a hindrance to anybody. We don't know if that was specifically her being targeted or if it was, just some random attack, probably random.
No. Yeah. It was just a car that was there.
Yeah. But it was good having the perspective of someone who essentially doesn't have any kind of, I suppose, connection to the issue directly, obviously indirectly, but not directly. So to get her perspective was good.
I didn't think about it until you said that, but when people think of race issues in America, the first thing they think of is black and white. But there was only one black person in this episode, or like a major character, just the kid.
Yeah. Dwayne.
Everyone
and
else.
There wasn't really a white main character either. There were a couple of cops, but they were just
just the white people
sort of
were just represented by the police. But and not that again, not that white people need to be represented in every episode, in every instance. Like it's like, yeah, no, we get it. We have a lot of
we know white people exist.
Yeah, we have a lot of shows where they are the only thing represented. So like I said, I didn't even think about it until you said that, but yeah, Koreans, Latinas, and a black person were like the main. And again, just one black person. He wasn't there for most of the time.
Yeah.
You know, this was about this Korean family.
Yeah. I found it interesting.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I found it interesting that Jin, I think was the name of the father, wasn't it? Yeah, I found it interesting that he did have so much prejudice. You would think that he might be more sympathetic, considering he's a minority himself. So I just found that interesting. I don't know if there is a long-standing rivalry between Koreans and black people. Look, that's just, I just found it interesting that he did have prejudices.
Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, I was shaking my head, not because I was like, yes, you would think that, but and there's not that there's any, quote unquote systemic long-standing rivalry, but I am constantly surprised and disappointed and amazed at how easy it is for one group to not be empathetic to another group in the very similar situations.
Yeah.
There is certainly prejudice between Asians and black people, and brown people, or Latinos and black people, and gay people and black people, and I guess I'm saying this as in terms of groups, but it's more accurate to say you should not necessarily presume any extra degree of empathy just because from the outside these two groups seem like they're very similar. I am again regularly surprised at how how one group who is also oppressed has no problem with the oppression of another group in America. I presume around the world. Maybe I shouldn't presume that, but that's certainly the case here.
Yeah.
We were talking about. I think we're off Mac. We were talking about the election between and Hillary Clinton. She lost because women didn't vote for her. If women, especially white women, had voted for Hillary Clinton, she in equal numbers to the way other groups did, she would have won.
I voted for her. I was excited. My impression is a lot of what happened was everybody just assumed there was no way that guy was going to win. So why even go out and vote? Because everybody else was going to not vote for him. And then that's why, I don't know if you saw the Saturday Night Live skit where the people were watching the election and they couldn't believe what was happening, and they were staying up all night watching it and just in disbelief.
Oh yeah.
That was our whole country. Yeah, that was crazy. Another thing about this one, just random little things. When Ben was getting the medical kit out of the ambulance, he said, "I spent some time in a hospital," and Jen looked up at him. I was thinking, oh, that's a reference to Paging Dr. Song. And then doing the research for this episode, I realized the writers of Paging Dr. Song are the same writers for this episode, Deric and Benjamin. So maybe they just put that on there intentionally. So
yeah,
I thought that was kind of
I did like that. The couple of little lines that he said when Ben gives this he kind of goes off on his dad. He gives this beautiful speech about how you need to see things differently. And the dad is kind of standing there for a second. It's like, when did you learn to speak Korean?
That was great. That was a moment of levity in such a heavy situation. I actually laughed. Yeah. That was a great release. Man, Raymond Lee can speak some good Korean, huh? He was good. Yeah. I was reading those subtitles like this. It was great.
And so and like I was saying, the way they weaved the backstory together, because Ben's like, oh yeah, you know what? I guess I had some unresolved issues with my own absent dad, and I didn't even think about that aspect of it either until he said it. But yeah, he was raised by a single mom, just trying to get by, just like Louisa.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's interesting what you were saying about the medical kit and the fact that he said he'd spent some time in a hospital. I still have trouble remembering that Ben's not actually a doctor, like a medical doctor, because obviously Sam was, and I keep thinking that Ben would have to have some sort of medical training so that he can handle what's going to come up on the leaps. But I have to keep reminding myself, hang on, Ben wasn't supposed to be the leaper. So he's probably not going to have the same sort of, qualifications that Sam had. Or, I mean, Addison probably doesn't even have that either. Although it would be good if she actually did prove to be a medical doctor down the track.
What do you guys think about Tom's theory that the engine of the machine is sacrifice? I thought that was really, really interesting. It's like, well, we always assume like there's a problem and it doesn't work the way it should. What if this is how it has to work?
Yeah. That's a kind of the way that I thought it worked anyway, because like Sam had to come to the realization that, his life's work is to quantum leap and to make the world a better place. So subconsciously, when he was building Quantum Leap, that's probably how he created it. But also, there's a theory around as well that the Quantum Leap accelerator might actually kill the person who's in there, and it's a ghost that's leaping around. And that could explain why they're able to inhabit other people's bodies, because that's something that ghosts do. So, and I mean, yeah, if you're dead, you can't come home. So, unless you've been resuscitated in, enough time. But I doubt that that's going to be the case.
So, by this theory, the accelerator isn't moving your consciousness around, but all it's really doing is just tracking your movements.
Yeah, that's what I would expect. I mean, the accelerator kills you, and you end up becoming a ghost that inhabits other people's bodies. I mean, I don't know if that theory holds up. I'm sure there's exceptions to this rule, like Al's leapt and come back, but it does, beg the question. If it is all about sacrifice, then I suppose that is definitely a possibility. Sometimes Sam and Al have been described as being angels. Well, it would make sense if they are dead. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it was part Tom trying to rationalize like just the tragedy of Sam and Ben not ever coming home, probably, and also him trying to protect himself from feeling that one day Ben will come back and take Addison back, or Addison will go back to Ben if he does come home. She has more of a real choice between two real life people. So like he's kind of hopeful that Ben doesn't come back because he doesn't want to lose Addison.
On another note, something I noticed, there was quite a lot of product placement in this episode. I would have thought they'd have to do like generic brands and things like that, but we saw Nikes in the episode. So, yeah. So I wonder how much Nike had to pay Quantum Leap to get their products in the episode.
I think they just got it cleared. I don't think they would have paid. I don't know, because I think any sneaker person...
I think they would have been paying.
So?
I mean, what big company wouldn't pay to get this sort of free advertising for, any time someone watches the episode?
Be interesting to find out. I'm not really a sneakerhead. I buy, my shoes at Walmart, my sneakers at Walmart. I sometimes I buy Nikes, my running shoes if I go jogging or Nikes, but other than that, they're just the $14, $15 shoes. So
I was thinking about that in terms of the shoes, and I was also thinking about that in terms of the music that they played. Because I mean, I don't remember exactly what or how many, but there were at least 2 or 3, well-known popular songs by the actual artist.
Yeah,
but also have to remind myself that 92 was 30 years ago, so it's probably not it's not what they would play for a Taylor Swift song today.
Yeah. Well, I was also wondering, we saw some K-pop being shown on the TV as soon as Ben leapt in. I wonder if that's actually time period appropriate, because obviously I don't follow the K-pop bands, but if they've just picked up some generic K-pop music, I would wonder if it's actually time appropriate, whether it was from before 1992, because it looked kind of new to me. It looked like something you'd see sort of now rather than in the 90s.
All I know is Blackpink. I listen to Blackpink, so they're good. Yeah, I like the '90s music. So I was hoping for some Boyz II Men because Rennie and I just went to a Boyz II Men concert and it was great. Yeah, usually the concerts at Epcot, the audience is half full. When Boyz II Men was there, it went all the way back in like to the American building, and it was like spread out, like the whole park was there. It was crazy. Every single show, people were there that day to see Boyz II Men. It was great. Anywho, I talked about it before, how it got me emotionally, the moment when Jin stood up for Dwayne. But it also reminded me a little bit of like that moment at the end of the Americanization of Machiko, where you have somebody who is racist and set in their ways, and an older person that only sees things one way, but then having a change of heart. So like I got a little bit of Machiko in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Actually, do have, I guess, a quick question. So when the beginning of the episode, Sonny is the other brother, right? Sonny hands Ben the shoebox full of cash, and he's like, "It's not what you think." I didn't know. Like, part of me was still like, "Yes, it is," but I didn't. And I was like, "Wait, am I being racist right now?" Because I mean, I didn't know. I mean, like, okay, but it's a shoebox full of cash. It looks super shady. It looks shady as hell. But also, no, I mean, once he said what it was, like, okay, well, that makes perfect sense. Of course, he just, he saved tips, or and it makes sense that he would have cash. He can't like write a check. He doesn't have an account. So yeah, he's got it in a shoebox and he gave it to him. Like it all makes completely perfect sense. Once he said what it was. But also, this is Quantum Leap, and I'm expecting twists and turns. Okay, well, maybe it's not what I think. Because the obvious thing is, okay, it's for drugs or something. And I was like, okay, well, maybe it's not drugs, but it's something. You're up to something that you should be doing. And I was wondering if everybody else thought that, like, what they thought, what they thought, I guess, in that moment.
My first thought was some kind of, like, the kid is collecting. Oh, well, my thought was, I guess from watching, like, mob movies or being from, New Jersey, I thought it was some kind of like the kid was collecting for like protection services, so they stuff like that. And then I thought maybe that he would have thought drugs because cash. But
right.
Yeah, but it was just
but everybody assumed that it was something bad, right?
Something nefarious, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, at least something that's not 100% legit.
Yeah, not legit. Okay.
Yeah. Not a dream. Not fulfilling a dream.
I need to talk about this. Hannah was not in this episode again. She's supposed to be this new recurring cast member, and we saw
Tom
her
wasn't
once
either.
For like maybe 8 minutes total. What's up with that?
I was fine with that.
Okay.
Personally, because I like this. Like I guess I'm trusting the process. And I guess I wasn't on the last episode, but like I don't know if you guys talked about it or not, but there was one scene where Ben was leading the actor the actor away, and he said something like, "Yeah, let's get out of here. There's some crazy lady talking about space and time."
That was so funny.
I guarantee that's her. We're going to see it in a later episode. That's her, because she's trying to catch Ben, or she's trying to communicate with Ben through people or something. I don't know, but it's just like the season finale last year, or the season finale of the last season. We're gonna go back through some previous sleeps, and we're going to see that she has been trying to communicate with him, and that's one of the moments where she almost caught up with him.
See, that's a cool theory.
Put it on the board. I'm calling it.
That's a cool theory. I was just assuming that he overheard Ben arguing with Addison, about what they're going through, and then I thought, oh, maybe he can even see Addison, and he's just choosing to like ignore it. I don't know.
Actually, you're probably right.
I like your theory too, though. It could work both ways.
I forgot he was a woman. in this episode.
Oh yeah, he was Summer, right? He leaped into
Summer.
Yeah. So.
All right. You know what? I'm going to keep it on the board.
Yeah. I like it.
I'm going to keep it on the board.
Put a pin in it and wrap a string around it.
In the leap out, the teaser at the end, there's the guy who's been shot, and he's saying, "You've got to find the formula," I think is what he said. That could be an introduction to Hannah, because it doesn't necessarily have to be some sort of like medicine or potion or anything like that, which you might think if they're talking about a formula. It could be some sort of a mathematical formula, which might have something to do with time travel. It looked like it was further back in the past than obviously this episode was. I don't know when it actually is, but if it's after 1949, but somewhat in that vicinity, like 10, 20 years, there's a good possibility we could see Hannah in the next episode.
The next episode is 206 Secret History, and it's written by Drew Lindo. So that's all I know about it, other than the teaser. I haven't seen that episode yet, so I'm very curious. If Hannah's not introduced in that episode, I don't know. Is she a witch in Salem?
There's not very many she can
207?
be in now, because I think there's only 3 left, isn't there?
I'm gonna call a conspiracy and a hoax and say nope, she was just a one-off guest star, and they're messing with us the whole.
No, we've seen her in the season trailers though, in more episodes. So
yeah, we've got so many episodes left.
Okay,
just be patient, young grasshopper.
So let's go with final thoughts and your 1 out of 5 rating. Let's go with Hayden first.
Okay, well, it's easily the best episode of the series so far. Probably better than anything in season 1 as well. So I'm obviously going to give this a perfect 5 very well placed Nike shoes through the episode out of 5. Yeah, I know that I had little nitpicks about like some of the positioning of what we saw, but I mean that's only a very minor thing, and compared to everything else that we got through the episode, which obviously we had to have, you know, it's nothing to remove any marks for. So yeah, perfect 5 Nikes out of 5.
All right, John.
Also, I mean, you've heard me, you know, this whole episode, I've been raving about it. I agree with you. You know, it's, you know, like in the Olympics, you know, it's one thing if you do something, if you nail it, but you know, this had a higher degree of difficulty. So like, you know, like, and they nailed it. They nailed it. They stuck the landing. So I'll give it 5 trash cans through the window.
Very good. Very good.
Making a mess, but leaving its mark. That was this episode.
I really love this episode. Only a few things bumped me. I think it was when they were first introducing Magic's alcoholism for like 10 seconds. I was like, oh no, they're going down another trope and they're just going to give him something to do, right? But by the end of the scene with Ernie doing that scene and talking about it, that thought went right away, and I was like, I was into it. That little shot of Ernie almost touching the glasses to get that alcohol, but not. Oh my God. But that bumped me a little bit. The blocking a little bit, because, you know, Ben, that shoe store was very small, and Ben and Magic again talking really loud, and nobody noticing. But I don't think that was anything to do with the actors or the writing. I think they were just doing the best with what set they had. You know, they did kind of look behind themselves every once in a while. You know, is anybody paying attention? But I don't think that's
area
anything
looked very
to give
familiar.
to knock off. Oh yeah, the alley again. I love seeing the alley every episode. You can't have an episode without it. I can't wait till the witches in Salem are have an alley. That's going to be interesting. Yeah. But man, I have to give this. It's definitely 100%, in my opinion, the best episode of the new series so far. I'm gonna have to I can't give it 10 out of 5, which I wanted to. But there's still MIA and The Leap Home out there, which still to me is a little bit higher, and even Black on White on Fire is higher than this episode. But for the new series, I'm just going to call this a perfect episode. I say great job by all. I'm going to give it 8 shoeboxes full of cash out of 10, out of 5. I'm going to give it 8 shoeboxes full of cash out of 5. So 8 out of 5.
I wasn't aware we could do that. I would have, because I really was thinking about going to 6.
You can change it.
But
it's not over yet. It's not. I didn't hit stop yet. So is it 5 or 6?
I mean, I'll go 6.
Hayden,
and I was and as you were talking, I was thinking about it. Also, like, we didn't even really talk about the family dynamic. I mean, like, we know that was the but like this trio of people, and how they're both, like, both sons are, you know, neither one of them wants to take over the store, but they're both still doing it in service of the family. Like that whole aspect of the show we didn't even really get to. So it's again, the fact they packed so much in, but it didn't feel nothing felt forced.
Nothing. It was just so good. Perfect. That's all I can say. Perfect. I can't really say anything else. Perfect. Job well done. They had a lot to live up to with the same kind of genre as Black and White on Fire, and I think they nailed it, and it's perfect. I think it's the best and most Quantum Leap episode of the new series. I just think it was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I can't rave highly enough for it. So any final thoughts before we go, guys?
I don't think you're wrong with, like, the possible Emmy nominations for this episode.
If Ernie Hudson doesn't win an Emmy for this, I don't know. I mean, his performance, it'll stick with me always. That man there's a reason that everyone knows his name. And I think he got to show it more in this episode than I've seen it ever before. So great guy and a very talented actor. I'll vote for him. All right. So
I really think that. Well, hang on. I was just going to say, I really think we could keep talking about this episode, you know, for another hour and a half. But unfortunately, our listeners have lives. Our podcasters have lives. So leave whatever comments you want in the comments of YouTube. We will eventually get to doing some feedback in an episode, but I have been reading them all and responding. So yeah, it is great seeing that we are getting a little feedback on YouTube.
Yeah. And of course, like, subscribe, and share. And we're trying to get to 500,000 subscriptions. I think we're right under 2,000, so we got a ways to go. So make sure you hit that subscribe button.
1955, the cutting edge of nuclear fusion. Einstein wrote this formula. We need to keep it from the Nazis. They could build a bomb.
Quantum Leap, November 15th on NBC and streaming on Peacock.
And of course, I'd like to thank Benjamin Raab and Deric Hughes for being on the show. That was great to get them on the show. Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll have you on again. And thank you to Tamika Miller, the director of this episode. Great to have you on. Before we go, John, can you let people know where they can find you?
Yeah, do a search for Captain GameShow. It's a trivia wordplay podcast. It's on the Infinite Potato Alliance Network. And all right, so quick aside, one of the games that I play, it's just random games that I come up with. One of the games that I play is called Pirate Jeopardy, where you have to answer in the form of a question and also answer like a pirate. I just found out a little while ago on Celebrity Jeopardy, they actually played that game.
Oh.
I'm gonna assume it was a coincidence, but in case
anyway,
feel free to contact Jeopardy. Yeah, feel free to contact Jeopardy and make them aware of me and advocate for, if not recompense, at least a position on staff.
Oh, cool. So this is your third or fourth time on the Quantum Leap podcast, Quantum Leap After Show, right, John? How many times?
Four,
maybe fourth or fifth,
maybe five.
I think.
All right, and Hayden and I haven't been on your show yet. No pressure, just saying. If you have,
do I get a smoking jacket? Do I get the jacket like on Saturday Night Live?
You definitely get a jacket.
The Five Timers Club.
Five Timers jacket. If you ever have a show,
I still haven't gotten
mine. If you have a show with Star Trek trivia, call us up.
Well, call Albie.
We'll do.
He'll get 100%. I'll get 0. Do one about Quantum Leap. It's been a while since you've done a Quantum Leap themed one.
There you go.
That's true.
All right. Well, thank you very much, John and Hayden. And it was always a pleasure having you on, John. Please come back anytime. We really appreciate you. And like I said, we love you. And thank you so much. For the Quantum Leap podcast, Quantum Leap After Show, I'm Albie.
I'm John.
And I'm Hayden. And for our viewers, I'm sorry if I'm a bit shiny this episode. It was the ectoplasm from the spooky ghost.
We'll see you next time.